Contreras leads. He goes the pitch. Swing drive. Hammer left. Jordan Walker hits a mammoth home run. Oh, what a trip around the bases. The Cardinals stun the Marlins down to their last strike and take a 2-run lead on a bomb over the bullpen.
And the runner goes from second to third on a tapper back to the mound, and it's overthrown. One run's going to score, and here comes the game winner. How do you like that? It's a Marlins walk-off win.
You give up 4 runs in the first again, and you battle back and you score 9 runs. The guys are into it. I mean, they are. You just can't give up 10. That's not big league. That's not big league quality at the moment.
Well, Oli Marmol frustrated, but let's be real.
Again.
Us Cardinals fans, we all knew that was going to happen. Maybe not as embarrassing as it did happen, but we all knew that was coming, right? Jordan Walker hits the go-ahead home run. There's no way Cardinals fans are sitting at home going, huh, Cardinals just won, and now the momentum is back on our side. No, it disappeared, and disappeared in an embarrassing fashion. Welcome, everyone, into BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Welcome to all of our YouTube viewers at 101 ESPN STL. Our live streams going now. Our text line, Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. We've got Tanner Hendrickson. We've got Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. That was embarrassing. And frankly, that might be the worst loss of the season. Nope, I'm going to rephrase this. That was the worst loss of the season for the Cardinals.
So far. So far.
I'm not sure you can beat that.
Have you said that yet this season? How many times?
I
At
haven't
least 3?
said that.
It's got to be 10.
I think I've said it's been a bad loss, but nothing to that extreme. The only way you can beat that is if a ball is hit as a pop fly to the outfielder, and the outfielder drops it, picks it up, and throws it over the stands.
Don't put it past him.
I guess that's possible. But looking at Jordan Hicks's face last night, when he airmailed that ball to the second row in Miami, you already knew where this season was going, but that was for you. The look on Jordan Hicks's face was, oh, so that's how the season is going to go. And it's done. Oli Marmol, you heard his voice. Wilson Contreras, you read his quotes. If you did it on the Post-Dispatch with Derek Gould, this team is cooked. Fork has been placed in them. They've said they are done. And now you've set it aside. You put it in the fridge and it's leftovers. Because there's no coming back from something like that. Even with 4 games going into the All-Star break, now it's just a matter of figuring out who's going to be shipped away for this Cardinals team. Because that was the 1,800 nails in the coffin for them.
Yeah, look, they were done before the game even happened. Like, let's just be honest. Like, they're not a playoff team. We knew it. They're 15 games below 500 before yesterday. They're now 16 games below 500, which ties the new season, or is tied for the worst mark on the season at 16 games below 500. But, like, last night was just the epitome of the St. Louis Cardinals season. The pitching was horrendous. And I mean...
I got to stop you, buddy.
What did I say? Epitome?
You did it again.
Oh,
epitome.
Man.
It's epitome. You're not going to get me in. So, Grant, you weren't here the last time he did this.
I heard it, though.
You did?
Yes.
Yeah, he said it.
I heard you say it in the office earlier correctly, though.
Yeah, you said it.
Because I thought about it.
What you do, man? You did epitome
when the cameras are on, there's more pressure on us.
You did epitome last time, and BK and I went a good 10 minutes trying to figure out what epitome was, and I said, wait, that's epitome. Okay, go on, buddy.
Anyways, the epitome of the Cardinals season, again, with the cameras on, more pressure. But, I mean, you get horrendous starting pitching. I mean, they had no chance. I thought after the first inning, after Liberatore has to get pulled, after a third of an inning, that the game was over and you could just turn it off. At least the offense then gave you a fighting chance. I mean, Arenado and Contreras basically willed the Cardinals back into that game. Arenado 3 doubles driving in 2. Contreras 3 hits driving in 2 as well. Corbin, good game, had a home run as well. And you go, okay, maybe the offense can outscore the Cardinals' pitching problems. And then you get to the bullpen. And the bullpen, you're sitting on hands and you're sitting on pins and needles trying to figure out if they're going to have a good outing. Stratton solid, Gallego solid. And then you go into that 9th inning and you definitely had in the back of your mind, okay, I feel like they're going to blow this game. Even though Jordan Hicks has been their best reliever and probably the only guy that belongs in the BK and Ferrario circle of trust.
Well, not after last night.
Well,
you don't get a trust if you throw a ball to the first baseman. And, I mean, you were throwing to Yao Ming at first base.
So you just knew they would find a way to lose. You didn't know how. You just knew they would find a way to lose. And last night's loss is just, it's unbelievable. Like, I'm at loss for words. The Cardinals, Contreras said it in the paper, as you said, basically, hey, look, we can't keep repeating the same thing. Well, don't worry, guys. I'm not going to repeat the same thing.
It is the epitome of the season for this Cardinals.
Exactly.
It really is the epitome. Hey, here's the thing, though. As much as we sit here and talk about how they have the offensive pieces, and look, it was the positive side of that game last night. But it took you until the 9th inning to score 9 runs and take the lead. You tied it 3 separate times. But then every time you tied it, you give up the lead. You went from Liberatore to Dakota Hudson. R.I.P. Dak, but that was bad, man. You need to go back to Memphis after that one. Steven Matz was your best pitcher in that game. And then Steven Matz does his job to the point where you sit there and say, okay, we're still in this. Now you get to the tighter end of our bullpen. And then you get the Jordan Hicks thing happen. And it's Groundhog's Day. It's the roller coaster season. If one thing fails, the other thing is going to prop you back up. But then when that props you up, you fall back down again for this Cardinals team. And frankly, I understand where Wilson Contreras is coming from. And, you know, I read the quotes from Oli, and I heard him talk post-game last night on Bally's. And he talked about how frustrating it is when people say, oh, well, the team's checked out and they're not putting their all into it. I don't think anybody is saying that.
Oh, I think a lot of people are saying that. A lot of fans are saying
maybe, but you can't sit there and claim that this team isn't going for it, because the offense, at least most of the time, does what they did last night. You get certain guys that are hitting well. The problem is you did nothing to your pitching staff in the offseason. You've done nothing to your pitching staff all season when you've seen it crumble and crumble and crumble. And now you're at the point where you're at a lack of innings because certain guys in your rotation have not been able to provide it for you. And now you've worn out your bullpen to where those arms are completely dead. So you don't have the answers anymore, because maybe a couple of months ago you could sit there and say, well, at least we have certain guys we can go to and we know they're rested. That's not the case anymore. You don't have Helsley. Hicks and Gallegos have been the guys that you've overused. Palante is basically broken. And then you go to your rotation and 3 of your guys can't even get you through the 3rd inning.
See, I don't even think the bullpen's overused. I think the bullpen's just not good. Like, I don't even think it's an overused thing. I think it is a lack of talent on the pitching staff.
But the bullpen didn't change from last year. It's the same bullpen.
I know, and I thought they needed to add a reliever in the offseason. But I also think, too, like, they had some injury, like Ryan Helsley is out, which forced James Nail to be up here, who then got sent down for Zach Thompson yesterday, dealing with Verhagen. And look, though Verhagen had been really down recently, there were spurts where Verhagen had been fine for the St. Louis Cardinals. And when I say spurts, I mean like the first month. But I don't. I think it is just a lack of. They don't have effective pitchers in the staff in general. The whatever it is, 12, 13 pitchers that they're carrying. There's one guy, maybe 2 that you could say is good, and they're both starters. 3. I guess I'll throw Hicks in there. I know he had the issue last night. They just don't have any quality pitching right now,
yeah.
And that is where it gets to the offseason where you talk about. This is where the retool is going to have to begin. And this is where, yes, they will be sellers at the deadline. They should capitalize on the pieces that they have in Montgomery, in Jack Flaherty, in Jordan Hicks. They should not move Paul Goldschmidt because they're going to keep Goldschmidt to keep this offense
trade
together. No, we're not blowing it up. We're retooling on the fly.
That works.
Like Armstrong's doing, apparently.
One more thing I want to say on the pitching, and then we'll get to this offense. And I pulled this from Derek Gould's piece on the Post-Dispatch. They've 27 leads they've lost or blew in 86 games this season. They've given up hits with 2 strikes to pitchers, and 35 times in 86 games in the first inning, they've trailed 24 times. So out of 86 innings, or 86 first innings this year, they've left it trailing 35 times. On top of that, since June 1st, a 9.62 ERA in the first inning, they've allowed 32 earned runs in the first inning over their last 29 games. I hate to say it, that's not a bullpen issue, that's your starting pitching issue. And if your starting pitching is a problem and your bullpen is a problem, well, then the task that you have to achieve this offseason is about as mighty as any team in Major League Baseball. Now, on the flip side of that, where I will agree with T-Bone, and I don't do that a lot, especially after your horrible take yesterday with Doug Armstrong.
I heard from Jamie Rivers.
She's terrible. The offense should be an optimistic side of this thing, because last night, you shouldn't have even been talking about the Cardinals in that game. The first inning, you should have been, turn the television off, it's over. But they made it a game. Why? Because Nolan Arenado is probably one of the hottest hitters right now in the National League. Because Jordan Walker continues to do what you expected him to do this season. And then you add the contributing pieces like Nolan Gorman's home run, Brendan Donovan having success. You have the pieces on offense. It's just your pitching is worse than anybody would have imagined. So for the Cardinals and for Cardinals fans, at least one side of the column is at least ready to go for you. It's figuring out how to build up the other one that's blown up.
Yeah, when we talk about kind of retooling on the fly for the Cardinals, the good news is that the offense is going to be something that is going to be a plus for this team, even if they have to trade from the depths of it. If they have to move, say, a Nolan Gorman at the deadline to help add a young, controllable starting arm, there still are pieces in this offense that are going to allow them to be good offensively next year. I mean, I ran through this today. Goldie, 132 OPS plus. You look at Arenado, 122. Walker, 119. Gorman, 113. Nootbaar, 106. And I know Contreras is below league average at 98, but you expect probably either a bounce-back year from Contreras or him to get hot here in the second half to where it's really going to get back to seeing the numbers on the back of his baseball card. Where it gets tough, though, is the fact of the matter that what you said, whereas they're going to have to retool the pitching. And originally, like in the first month or two, it was, okay, they just got to work on the rotation. They can do that in an offseason. Now it is not just the rotation, it's the bullpen, and it's the depth of the system as a whole. Because look at what they called. They called up Hudson and Thompson. Their top reliever options that they call up were James Nail and JoJo Romero. Anybody feel comfortable about those guys being called up?
My dad was watching it with me on 4th of July, and he goes, who the bleep is JoJo Romero? So, yeah, that's about where we're at this season.
They just have no depth in the system in terms of pitching as a whole. And that's where this kind of retooling of it is going to be difficult for the St. Louis Cardinals, to where it almost looks at it, you can look at it and go, man, that's going to be a lot to fix in one offseason. They should still be able to do that, but it is going to be a lot tougher of a challenge than originally thought, I believe. Well,
we're going to hear from Jason Isringhausen a little bit later. He was on with the Fast Lane yesterday and had some comments about that, so we'll talk about that pitching side of things. We'll get into Jordan Walker. We do have some Blues conversations coming your way, and John Denton of MLB.com is going to join us coming up at 11:30. But coming up next, a recent article in The Athletic mentioned the St. Louis Blues head coach as one of the members on the hot seat going into the season. Do you agree? We'll discuss that next here on 101 ESPN. So every offseason, when it comes to really any sport, you always look at a team and you find the individual who's on the hot seat, right? You start to warm up the seat for coaches around teams in the offseason. Well, it's hockey offseason, and now is the hot seat conversation, at least for ESPN. And alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. It is BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We are live on our YouTube page, so you can go to our cameras at 101 ESPN STL. And, of course, you can jump in on our text Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. We got John Denton coming up on the other side to talk a little more Cardinals baseball. But ESPN's writers put together a list of coaches that could be on the hot seat, or they were taking some offseason questions, and one question was coaches that could be on the hot seat. And Ryan Clark, who big fan of, writes for ESPN, used to be the Seattle Kraken beat writer for The Athletic, he said it'd be Craig Berube. This is what the quote was from Ryan Clark. With Berube, the expectations are high there every year to win. The second executive explained they won the Cup in 19, had the COVID year in 20, and in 21 they lost early in the playoffs, and in 22 they had what I felt was a good year, but with them missing the playoffs, I think he could be on the hot seat, but my number one is DJ Smith in Ottawa. Head coach in Ottawa, makes sense. Berube, to me, not so much. And I'm sure Tanner might be on the complete opposite side of this one. It's a non-starter with Craig Berube on the hot seat, in my opinion, because if he was already on the hot seat, Doug Armstrong wouldn't have backed him last year. But Doug speaking out last season and saying, look, Craig Berube's our coach. We're not doing this. Like, I forgot how he phrased it, but he basically said if there's bullets in a chamber, Craig Berube's name is not on one of those bullets. He did that last year and then framed the blueprint of this retool in 2 to 3 years. That's when they expect to be competitive again. No coincidence that time's up with Craig Berube's contract length with this team. Same with Doug Armstrong. To me, Doug Armstrong backs Craig Berube last season, says that they're in this retool. Craig Berube's your head coach for this retool. You've got some younger players coming up. Craig Berube has had success with younger players. You've got the core pieces in place. By no means am I taking blame away from Craig Berube from this team struggling. But what I do not see happening is if this team falters this season, Craig Berube getting the axe. Because I think Doug Armstrong sticks with him through this retool. And then if it still isn't working, when Doug Armstrong deems this team competitive, that's when Craig Berube, to me, gets the boot.
I don't think his seat is like extremely on fire to where it's like, hey, they get off to an 0-7 start or a 1-6 start. Craig Berube's going to get the axe and he's out as the Blues head coach. But I do think it's somewhat warm, and it just might be a lukewarm. And I think that is partially because I think it's not even on the defense in terms of even results, really. I think it's on the growth of the younger players. What does Jake Neighbors look like here in year 2? More importantly, does Jordan Kyrou seem to develop a 200-foot game? Can Craig Berube get Jordan Kyrou to buy into that 200-foot style of hockey? Because that's really the guy that I circle as, hey, Craig Berube's future is dependent on this. Because if Craig Berube can't get to him, get through to him, I think you could see where the Blues try to bring somebody else in, whether it's a younger coach or a coach that will come in and just be a little harder on Kyrou if that's what they think is needed. But I do think his seat is somewhat warm because though they're not a team that has got Stanley Cup expectations going into next season, I do think they have playoff expectations. I do believe, even though Army wasn't able to go and retool the defense this offseason, at least right now he hasn't been able to. I do believe the expectations from Doug Armstrong is for this team to at least attempt to and be competitive enough to be in the conversation to sneak into the playoff picture. And who is one of the guys that's going to help with that? It's going to be that the forward group and defense get better defensively as a whole unit, not just the defense, but as a whole unit. And Kyrou, Vrana, guys like that buy in more to 200-foot style of game. And who's the guy that's going to be responsible for trying to get them to buy into this system that Craig Berube likes to play? It's Craig Berube. So I do think the seat is somewhat warm. I don't think it's on fire. I don't think I would put him as like the second hottest seat in the NHL right now. But I do think it's lukewarm. I do think that Army will be evaluating him this season, and it's not just Craig Berube's our coach of the future. He's the guy that's going to lead us through this retool. I think it's still kind of open-ended to where, hey, if I don't see growth from certain players, I may look, yes, it's on the player, but who's the scapegoat? It would be the head coach. And I think that's why I think it's a little bit lukewarm.
I'm with you 100%. I think that it's not really standings based right now. I think what you're looking at is individual performance, and you look at players like Jordan Kyrou, like you said, Robert Thomas. You look at some of the younger players that are going to be coming up. You mentioned Jake Neighbors, Alexandrov, any of them. I think you're just looking for them to commit to their games a little bit more. And defensively, you got to see what the systems are, how they've changed. What progress are you making from last year to now? That's what it's all about. I don't think it's necessarily about the wins or the losses. I think it goes back to what Doug Armstrong has said before. It's how you win and how you lose. That is the big teller of how the season is going for him. And for Craig Berube coming up this season, and I think this goes for any coach in the National Hockey League, really in all of sports, it's about where were you last year and are you progressing? Are you progressing towards the goal that you've set? And as you mentioned, Tanner, the goal is to be competitive in 2 to 3 years. So if you're seeing progress towards that and you're seeing players get better and the team overall getting better from last year to this year, then no, I don't think Craig Berube's seat is hotter than any other coach in the National Hockey League.
There's a difference to me when you're talking coaches of system and individual play, because if you look at a system and you say, well, this just isn't matching, then yeah, you can point the finger at the coach and say, all right, something's not right here. Like last season, all these backdoor tap-ins, you're like, oh, okay, what's going on here? But then you also saw, and we talked about this so long throughout the season, Grant, of when you saw them post shutouts against the Edmonton Oilers and when you saw them perform at the stage. At that point, if you're a president of hockey operations, you look at it and say, this might be individual based. And that's the part that I just wonder, and I don't know this, because this could be Doug's evaluation, and it is the scapegoat of Craig Berube. But my answer to that always is, well, then who's the better option? Because if you get rid of Berube, you're going to have to find somebody else. Otherwise, you're going to be doing what you did until you found Ken Hitchcock and going through coach after coach after coach until you get the right guy. But at what point do you sit there and say, maybe it's the player? Maybe as much as we want this player to be more of a two-way forward, we didn't draft him the right way. Some of that's on the coach to utilize that player, but some of that's on the player. And that's the difficult part if you're Craig Berube and Doug Armstrong of evaluating who meshes well. It really comes down to the leaders in that locker room. If they're the ones that feel the coach is the right person, then that's the coach that's going to be there.
See, I don't disagree that it is on the players. Then if you look at them and they're struggling and you go, man, why is he not developing? Yes, that's partially on the player. But the player's going to be here longer than the coach, especially if we're talking about a Kyrou, Thomas, using them as examples here, because they've got the 8-year max contract extension. Like, they're going to be here longer, and it's not going to be, hey, let's find the players that work with Craig Berube. It's going to be, hey, let's find the coach that's going to work with Jordan Kyrou. So that's where I just kind of, I don't disagree with you, because I think you're right. I think, like, the conversations around the Cardinals right now, are there parts to blame on Oli? Yes. Is the whole reason this team is 16 games below 500 on Oli Marmol? No, not at all. It's on the players. It's on the pitching. No, just no. But I think when you look at the Blues, I think the same story is true. Why did they struggle last year? I'm not sure how much of it was a coaching issue. I think there were some things that could be pointed to on Craig Berube. There's definitely things that could be pointed to on Doug Armstrong. It was a player's issue. Players not buying in, players not getting back defensively, at least the forward group, and not back checking well enough. The defensemen being, say, soft in front of their net and getting pushed around and allowing those easy tap-in goals that we're talking about. But at some point, you have to look at the roster and go, all right, well, we invested in Kyrou and Thomas. Is Berube the guy that's going to help these guys get to the next step? And if they feel that the answer is no and they're not seeing progress, then the Blues will make a change if they view it necessary.
I'll say this. The part that could start the heater on Craig Berube's seat is if the defense struggles again this year. And I say that because Mike Weber was a Craig Berube hire. I mean, Craig Berube was one that spoke about him. We really didn't see comments from Doug Armstrong about Mike Weber, who was hired as the new defensive coach to replace Mike Van Ryn. Now, of course, Doug Armstrong's got a say in it, but it seems like this was more of a Craig Berube decision. And if your defense struggles, that's when I believe, at least if you're Doug Armstrong, you say, all right, maybe we need to start thinking about something else. But again, I'm just more of a component for a coach that I know it's worked with. I'd look at that and say, maybe it was a roster construction thing also.
Again, yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's the same players as last year. You're hoping for different results with the same players you're putting out on the ice. I think it's different for coaches who are on teams that want to win now. For instance, Gerard Gallant in New York, he had a team assembled of superstars in New York and made the playoffs, was one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference last year. But
the guy's been fired like 5 different times.
Right, and that might be a whole different thing. But you get eliminated by the New Jersey Devils, a team that hasn't made the playoffs in, 6 years?
Yeah.
And you get eliminated in 7 games after being up 2-0, like, you get fired. But for Craig Berube, it's not based off of if they're making the playoffs. They're not going back to the original article saying St. Louis is a place that expects to win. It's not about making the playoffs and winning. It's about progressing these players right now.
Now, I will say I think the conversation changes a little bit because if the Blues had acquired, if the Sanheim deal goes through and Krug doesn't waive his no-trade clause, and again, I know we're living here in like a what-if reality in this scenario, I do think more pressure would be on Craig Berube.
Agreed.
Because acquiring Sanheim then says...
We gave you the right roster. Now you're going to have to. Yeah, I'm with you on that
we
one.
We made the adjustments on our blue line. We brought in a top 9 forward. Like now is time to make that step and get to the playoffs. But because they didn't get the defenseman, that's why I said it's more about progression than it is results.
And that's
right
why
now.
I would say next year is if they do make an overhaul on defense, that's when the seat starts to get warm. To me, DJ Smith and Craig Berube are in very two situations. DJ Smith's team in Ottawa is on the uprise in terms of they should be competing now, and if they're not competing, Ottawa is where the Blues were when they got Ken Hitchcock. We need to start winning, and they got the coach that could win. The Blues aren't there yet. As much as they're competitive, they're not ready to start winning for a cup, and that's where the seat starts to get a little bit warmer. 314-399-9646, that's our Air Comfort Service text line. Also on our live YouTube page at 101 ESPN STL. We'll get to our questions and answers segment in a bit, but coming up next, back to the Cardinals. John Denton, MLB.com Cardinals insider. We'll ask him what the heck happened last night in Miami next here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the Cardinals fall in disappointing fashion to the Miami Marlins 10-9 after Jordan Walker put the team ahead. One run in the top of the ninth with a two-run homer. A Jordan Hicks error in the bottom of the ninth results in a walk-off winner for the Marlins. Tonight, the Cardinals will look to bounce back and avoid the sweep in Game 4 of this series in Miami. It'll be the righty Yuri Perez for the Marlins, who's 5-2 this season with a 2.47 ERA, and it'll be Jack Flaherty for the Cardinals. First pitch will be at 5:40. And for the Blues today, they made one signing. Hugh McGee has been signed to a two-way one-year contract with $775,000 at the NHL level. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports and Update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Well, you heard it in Graham Francis's update. A tough loss once again last night for the Cardinals. They try and avoid the sweep later on tonight against the Marlins. Alongside Graham Francis and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario as we head out to our guest line now and welcome in our weekly insider for MLB.com. He is John Denton. John, out in Miami last night, saw that loss. That has to be rock bottom this season, right, John?
Yeah, Alex, you would think so. I mean, they've lost some gut punch games. Gio gave up the 2-strike, 2-out home run to the Giants that day. Helsley gave up a walk-off in San Francisco. But, I mean, this one just takes the cake. I mean, a ball hit right back to the pitcher and 2 runs score. A guy comes around from first base. Like, there was just shock on guys' faces that you hadn't seen all season where – there's just a disbelief that this keeps happening to a team that was supposed to be, back in the playoffs for a 5th straight year. So it was absolutely shocking. It's like a team that can't believe what's happening to themselves.
Yeah, John, and listening to Oli talk postgame and really all season, you could hear the frustration in his voice, and rightfully so, but when he makes the comment of, look, our pitching has to be better and it has to be better fast, that's the part that gets so confusing because you look at it and you say, well, it's not like they're worn down. Yes, they're dealing with injuries, but this is just the pitching staff you went into the season with, and they're just not pitching well.
Yeah, they're just not good enough, Brent. Alex, you can't be behind 3-0, 4-0 every day and expect your offense to bail you out. Last night I felt bad for Jordan Walker, who hit the biggest home run of his career. I felt bad for Nolan Arenado, who had 3 doubles and was a quarter of an inch away from a 4th double. Wilson Contreras, I felt bad for him. He had 3 hits and he slid headfirst into first to beat out a ball to get on base to keep that inning alive. Those guys were playing out of their minds last night, trying to will that team to a win. And then you have pitching go out and give up 4 runs in the first. They get the game tied. The first pitch, the next inning, they give up a home run. And then the ninth inning, Jordan Hicks has to be better with leadoff hitters. I think that's the 7th leadoff hitter he's walked this season. He has to come into the game sharper. He has to know to check that runner going around third. He knew they were running on the pitch. You've got to look that runner back and then make a good throw to first. So, pitching is at the root of this team's problems. They keep giving up the first inning. Since July, since June 1st, they have a 9 ERA in the first inning. That can't keep happening, and you put yourself in a hole. So, pitching is at the root of all this. It's why they have 18 blown saves. It's why they have 18 one-run losses. It's at the root of everything right now.
John, speaking of the pitching, Matthew Liberatore doesn't even get out of the first inning last night, and it's been a couple of bad starts for him in a row, and the ERA is at 6.75 now. What do you think the plan is with Matthew Liberatore moving forward?
Yeah, kind of like with Waino, you can't keep trotting him out there. It breaks the will of everybody else on the team, and it's not working. Something has to change. He's having trouble holding his velocity. One second he's throwing 95, 96. The next second you look up and it's 92, 93. His curveball's kind of rolling out of his hand. He's not pitching inside. All the reasons, there's been like 4 or 5, quick early bad starts now. And I wouldn't be shocked if he's not sent back to the minor leagues. They've got to try something different there. We all saw what happened to Waino the other day. They had to try something different there. So they keep trying to shuffle the deck, keep trying to find something that works. But everything that they touch right now kind of blows up in their face.
John, do you think there's a chance that they could try just flipping him with Steven Matz and see if he would work well as a kind of one-inning spurt reliever out of the bullpen as a lefty?
Yeah, that's you got to try something different at this point. Oli Marmol said yesterday that Steven Matz was under consideration, but you started a kid who has struggled all season on 3 days rest. You kind of knew that was going to go badly. I mean, we all kind of thought that. You hope the best for Matthew because he's a great kid and he's a great talent. He's only 23 years old, but that was a rough spot for him to be in last night. And it tells you all you need to know about the plight that they're in. They have a $44 million pitcher in Steven Matz who they couldn't start last night. Matz has been a lot better in the bullpen. I would have rather seen Matz get that start last night, but he didn't. It just tells you about, all they're going through with pitching. It doesn't matter what they try, who they pitch. It's just not going well, and something has to change. They've got to figure something out because you can't start off every night down 3-0, down 4-0. It breaks the spirit of the rest of the team.
We're talking with John Denton, our Cardinals insider for MLB.com here on BK and Ferrario. John, we've seen the roster moves from the Cardinals when Waino goes to the IL, when they've had different things. It's been Matz, it's been Liberatore. They brought up Zach Thompson. It's been James Nail, JoJo Romero. They're not bringing up these younger pitchers, and it seems like this task in terms of overhauling the pitching staff, rotation, and bullpen by next season is going to be a lot more daunting than we originally thought.
Yeah, there's not a lot coming from the minor leagues. I mean, other than Gordon Graceffo, who got another AAA win, he got his second AAA win last night. There's not a lot on the horizon as far as what you can tap into down there. Now, they did use quite a bit of their minor leagues last season. I think there were 12 players who made their major league debut last season who came from the minor leagues. So, the help is not in AAA like you would hope. You would think, okay, you're struggling at the big league level. Call up some of the bright young kids. They're not really down there right now. This franchise needs a total overhaul in pitching. They need young pitching prospects coming. They need guys in AAA who can come and take some of these starts, but they just don't have that right now. And I wouldn't be shocked if pitching is not a primary focus in the Major League Baseball draft that starts on Sunday. Last season, the first, I think 5 of the first 6 picks were all pitchers. So I fully expect them to go pitching heavy again in this draft that's coming up on starting Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
John, as a follow-up to that, if the Cardinals believe they're in this winning window, can they overhaul this pitching in one trade deadline and offseason, or is this going to take multiple years?
It's probably going to take multiple years. It's going to, they're kind of in a mess right now. Actually, like you said, there's not a lot of help on the way. Cooper Jerpy, their number 1 pick from this past season, had arthroscopic surgery to remove a loose body in his elbow, so he's out now. So that probably sets him back a year. A couple of their pitchers, Bryson Motts and Pete Hansen, have pitched well in the minors, but they're in single A. They're a couple years away. They're going to have to spend this all season. They're going to have, people question, whether Mo did enough getting pitching this offseason. He's got to have the budget to do that. They've got to be willing to commit to paying big money for pitchers. Pitchers aren't cheap. If you go out and get somebody at the deadline, you're not going to get a total, guy who moves the needle. You're not going to get that guy in an offseason. That's going to probably be a free agent, and you've got to spend to get them. So there's a lot of dynamics that go into this. I think they all know they've got to upgrade their pitching, but you've got to be able to spend to get it. You've got to be willing to give up prospects to get it. You've got to spend the cash to get it. So it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be a quick process.
John, I was just going to ask you, you just mentioned giving up the prospects to get it. What is your sense on how open and willing the Cardinals will be, whether it be at the deadline or in the offseason, to move on from some of this young offensive core that they kind of have to go and improve and jumpstart this kind of retool of the rotation?
Well, the Cardinals have always been a draft and develop franchise. I mean, that's their lifeblood. That's the way they control salaries. They want to be that team. They want to be that franchise that survives off of promoting guys from the minor leagues. And but I think they've overvalued some of their prospects. I think they've hung on to some of them maybe that they shouldn't, or been reluctant to trade some of them. They're going to have to be maybe a change in philosophy there, because they can't keep going like this with pitching this bad. It ruins everything. So you may have to give up a Nolan Gorman. You may have to give up a Lars Nootbaar. You're not giving up Jordan Walker. I doubt you're giving up Mason Wynn, but you may have to move some of these young players that are contract controlled to be able to get the kind of pitching you need. It's not going to be cheap. Like, if you want a good pitcher, you're going to have to give up 2 or 3 elite prospects, and that's just the way this game works.
He is John Denton. John, always appreciate the time, sir. Thank you so much. Enjoy Miami, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Sounds great, guys. Take care. Thanks.
There you go. He's John Denton joining us here on BK and Ferrario. You can follow him on Twitter at John Denton555. That last comment there, basically the last couple of things he said about acquiring pitchers, it's going to cost you. And it's something that Cardinals fans are screaming for John Mozeliak to do in terms of be aggressive and acquire starting pitchers, but don't want him to give up the types of players that it's going to require. And what I mean by that is Mason Wynn, Graceffo, McGreevy, Gorman, Brendan Donovan. These are the guys you are going to have to part with if you want to acquire pitching. And we're going to get into this in the 12 o'clock hour. If you consider yourself in a winning window, then you better be the most aggressive general manager, president of baseball operations in all of Major League Baseball, starting on August 1st, all the way up until the start of spring training in 2024.
Yeah, and Wynn's the only name that I think you can take out of that list that you just read off. Otherwise, everybody else they could be open to. And when John said, sometimes they overvalue their prospects, I think he's right. And I think he was even referring to the pitching. I even think it's at the position players as well, because look at Dylan Carlson. They said you can't pry him from our cold dead hands. And you look at him now and you're looking at him and you're going, I don't even know if he's a part of our future. They've got to figure out who they feel comfortable with, and they can't be scared after the Rosarena deal. I think they've become a little gun shy as well in terms of moving on from prospects and wanting to give them more opportunity here in St. Louis than they probably deserve. I think they waited too long on Tyler O'Neill, possibly even Dylan Carlson. I think they've got to look at some of the bats they have and go, and even some of the pitching prospects, and go, who is someone that we truly believe is going to be a legitimate contributor to the Cardinals in a year, 3 years right now? I think they can look at guys like Lars Nootbaar. They've got to figure out what they have in Nootbaar. Do you sell high on Lars Nootbaar right now? I'd be open to the idea. Brendan Donovan, kind of the same way. Sell high on him. Some of those other arms that you just mentioned, but Grevey, Graceffo, they feel more like profiles as number 3, number 4 starters. But can you sell high on them right now while they're some of the top prospects in Major League Baseball? They're going to have an interesting deadline. I know they're probably going to be selling off a lot of pieces. I'm fascinated to know if they're going to be willing to part from some of the offensive core to help out the rotation.
He's Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. 314-399-9646 is our Air Comfort Service text line. Also on our YouTube live page, you can post your questions there at 101 ESPN STL. We'll go to questions and answers next here on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646. That is our Air Comfort Service text line. Our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL alongside Tanner Hendrickson, Grant Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario as we get to your questions now here on BK and Ferrario. From the 636, why would we invest in acquiring young pitching prospects or for our young pitching prospects? Are we going to invest winning now or are we going to invest winning later? You can't get by with being stuck in the middle anymore. This is my concern when John just said that. If this is a multi-year process, then you need to start selling off pieces for players that aren't at the major league level yet. Because if you're going for guys that are at the major league level, well, then you need to be shipping out prospects. But if you're shipping out younger players to get younger players, there's got to be an in-between here. You got to decide, are we wanting to win a World Series within the next couple of years, or are we planning to win with the younger core of Wynn and Walker in 3, 4, 5 years from now? Because you can't do this in between.
I think you do in terms of adding in young players like prospects and trying to add talent to the Major League club. I think you're trying to do both. I mean, they have no pitching depth at all. And when I mean at all, I mean at the Major League level and in their system. I mean, you just heard him say Jerpy, who's like 3-4 years away, had a setback with having a elbow surgery. You've also got McGreevy, Graceffa, probably 2 years away. Like, they need to be focusing on both. The trading away of these assets, when I'm talking about assets, I'm meaning free agents be like Jordan Hicks, Jordan Montgomery, Jack Flaherty. Those guys you want to bring in more than likely young players that are maybe at like the AA, AAA level that have some upside that you see that you think can contribute in 2-3 years. When you get to the offseason or when you start trading a young talent like Nolan Gorman potentially for a starting pitcher for this rotation, that is to try and fix the now. And I think they're going to do both. I think they're going to try and fix the rotation for next season so that they can get by for a year or two and remain competitive and try and get back into the playoffs. Because let's just be honest. Right now, the discussion isn't how do we build for a World Series. The discussion is how do we build to get back to the postseason? Because you can't skip the step of getting to the postseason to get to the World Series. And they're not a postseason team right now. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to acquire pitching help at the deadline by probably trading away a young, controllable position player, add in a starter to jumpstart that, go into the free agent market, sign a starter or two to keep the rotation competitive next year. And then they're also, when they trade away these pieces like Jack and Monty, looking for pieces that can help them in the future as well, because they need to be supplementing the minor leagues just as much as they need to supplement the major league rotation.
Isn't that a scary concept, though, to try to do both? Because, Alex, it reminds me at the end of the season what you said about you didn't want the Blues to be the Nashville Predators and try to do both. Yeah. Retool on the fly and stay competitive, still try to be in the playoffs. And
look what they did. They said, screw it, we're rebuilding.
Yeah. So
you got to pick a path.
Exactly. That's why I'm saying it's kind of a scary situation to be in if you're going to try to do both, because you're going to do both, but you're going to do neither well.
Yeah, and that's my bigger concern with that is you look at this and say, well, we've got Goldschmidt and Arenado, and we've got to win now. But we're also waiting for the Walkers and the Wins and the McGreevies and the Graceffos and the Tim Kenses to be a part of this.
I think it's easy. I'm not, let me rephrase it. It's not easy to do both. But I think the Cardinals have been doing both for John Mozeliak's entire tenure. Like, they've been competitive while building through the system and graduating prospects through the system for them.
But I think they started that and leaned heavily into it like 2015. Because at the beginning of Mo, it was, you've got Pujols and all these guys, we're going to win now. And then like 2015, you started to say, well, now we got to go a little bit younger with this. And we got to start getting guys in the draft and start developing. And that really is what, it's a perfect comp. The Nashville Predators. I don't want the Cardinals to be the Nashville Predators of like, we could just keep going with this and just adding one piece and it's going to work, when it's not going to work. And we're going to get more into that on the other side, but a couple more questions from the 314. Fellas, do you have any idea what role Ivan Herrera is going to play as a part of this Cardinals future?
Do the Cardinals know right now?
I think right now he's like one of their top trade chips because he's been great in the minor leagues. I don't know what his role would be unless they really think he could be a 50-50 split with Wilson Contreras. But they had questions last year. And look, they said that he's improved upon this, which was his game calling and his receiving behind the plate. I think right now he's one of their better trade assets. I think Andrew Knizner has solidified himself as a quality backup catcher that can play whatever it is, 60 games that he may end up playing this year. So I think they feel comfortable with Knizner as the backup to Contreras. I think they'll use Herrera as a trade chip. I think he's up now, one, because Knizner's on the IL, but if he stays past the All-Star break, it's to get him some playing time and also try and continue to boost his trade value by saying, hey, look, he did this in AAA. Now he's starting to play well here at the major league level.
Yeah, tinfoil theory for you guys on this one. I think teams have said Mo's making calls, and this is just me assuming Mo's being aggressive right now. Mo's made calls about trades, and Herrera's name has been brought up, and other teams are like, yeah, but what is he? He's great in the minors, but what is he? And this is Mo's way of saying, we got to start getting some reps for him at the major league level. Because you're going to have to find out what he is if he's going to be a part of a trade package. Because you got to make a decision. Contreras is here for the next 4 years. Kisner's the honorary captain in this clubhouse. Where does Herrera fit into this? Sure, you could probably carry 3 catchers, but we already saw what that effect was to this team, and it was nothing. Unless you're using Herrera and Contreras more in a DH and Herrera more as a bat, you're not doing anything. You're doing what you've done already this season multiple times. So I think it's playing time for him so that teams can find out what he is and you could trade him.
If he is the trade piece right now, I find that frustrating because they were super high on Ivan Herrera at one point last season.
Yeah, he was the next Yadier Molina, and so was Carson Kelly, and so was, who was the other guy that I'm completely forgetting right now? There was another catcher in their system that they were super high on.
I think it was Kelly and Kisner are the two that
Was
I can
Kisner
remember.
the guy? Well, and they got another guy down there right now that they're Rodriguez that they are really excited about.
But now you've done the same thing, and it's a little bit different because he's just a prospect, but you've done the same thing with Herrera that you've basically done with Carlson.
Because the Cardinals continue to do the same thing over and over and over.
And this is where it's frustrating because last year you had an opportunity where you were competitive and you needed pitching before the playoffs. Now they went out and got Jordan Montgomery and Jose Quintana, yes. But you still needed an ace. And they had the prospects to do it, and they didn't do it.
Yep.
And now you've waited, and Ivan Herrera's trade value is not what it was last year.
Yeah.
That's where it gets frustrating.
Yeah, well, and the Cardinals do that also, where you wait so long for guys that you could get a good return in. One more from the 314. Fellas, I heard you talking about Prospect Camp the other day. Are there any other names that people aren't talking about that they should be talking about? Grant, I know there's a couple guys that popped out to you from Prospect Camp.
Yeah, I mentioned Theo Lindstein, who I am really excited about, the defenseman. Yes. Now, I didn't say that one. ESPN said that, to be fair. I said he's a Carl Gunnarsson with more upside.
That's good.
If you're trying to level expectations,
I'll take a little boom in my life.
Hey, he had a nice little shootout goal at Prospect Camp, so
I'm okay
who knows?
with that.
Dylan Peterson was a name that he wasn't on my radar at all, and he popped out to me at Prospect Camp. Same thing for Ian Murphy. They're a little bit older of prospects. They're 23, 24 area. So their potential is probably not as high as the younger players at the Prospect Camp, but I thought they played well. Another one, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, but Ivan Vorobiev.
Yeah, that was the Russian kid that they got last year.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, he's got some offensive skill, and he popped out to me because of that. And one more, I forget his first name, but his last name is Kaskamaki, and me and Luke Horak were talking about him. Luke Horak loves him at Prospect Camp, but that guy drove to the net.
Yeah.
Like, every time he had the puck, he entered the offensive zone, and it was straight to the net, and sometimes he would capitalize on it too. Zachary Dean played a lot with Otto Stenberg, the Blues' first-round draft pick. He was their second pick in the first round this past season. What I love about them, they kept it simple, and they did the same thing, put pucks on net and all that. So those were the players that stood out to me and who I liked at Prospect
I'll tell
Camp.
you, Otto Stenberg, the kid that they got, what was that, 25th overall pick this past year? He's got a hell of a shot. It's going to be probably 3 years, but got a hell of a shot. And then the kid that they drafted in the third round, Pekarchik, I think. Yeah.
I think.
We talked with him at the draft, but he also, a big Slovakian, and JR did a piece on The Athletic talking about how Pavel Demitra was his idol. And I remember asking him about Demitra and said he loved Demitra growing up. He's got some offense to his game also. So I would say you got a lot of offense right now in your system, which we've talked about is going to be a good thing for this team if you want to try and flip those to get some assets. One team that hasn't been able to flip their prospects for assets, T-Bone, are the St. Louis Cardinals.
I don't disagree.
Oh, okay, good. I just wanted to see if you agreed with me on that one. No, but Jason Isringhausen, we've talked about how pitching prospects could be coming. It might be longer than we're expecting. And how does that impact this offseason for the Cardinals? We'll discuss that next on BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends at Apache Village RV Center. 8 acres in Hazelwood for you to walk around and check out their inventory. And when I say 8 acres, it is filled with RVs. You've got the small ones that you're just starting out and you just want to attach to the truck and maybe just get a feel for the RV life, or maybe you're ready to go all in and you want the one that you can live in. It looks like a mansion, and I promise you, it looks like a mansion. They've got that for you also. And you might hear this and think, boy, RVs are expensive, Alex, though. Change the way you do vacationing. And look, they've got financing options for everybody. What I love about Apache Village RV Center is it is a family environment. It's a third generation group of family, Meyer family, that have been running this RV business, and they treat you like family. They've been in this business for 40 years, and they only take care of their clients. Once you're a part of that family, you know that you're in. So go out there, chat with them, tell them myself and BK sent you, and just take a look at the inventory, because you'll fall in love with what Apache Village RV has, and you'll want to go one better when it comes to your vacation, and you'll go Apache Village RV Center.
From a pitching perspective, if we just focus in on that by itself, because I think the young talent is there. I think the lineup can score runs. You've got future Hall of Famers in the lineup, which I think is always a very important part of the culture of Cardinal baseball. To me, it's mind-boggling to see a franchise that is this accustomed to winning to be this overnight thin in pitching. I mean, it is dramatically thin in starting pitching and bullpen. And to me, it's as if that snuck up on us. It's like, whoa, where'd this come from? It is an alarming state for the Cardinals to be in.
That was Greg Amsinger from the opening drive earlier today. You can go check that out on the podcast page later on at 101ESPN.com, presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. You can head over to our YouTube channel right now and be with us today at 101ESPN STL. Myself, Tanner Hendrickson, Grant Francis, hanging out until 2 o'clock this afternoon. But Greg Amsinger's talking about something that we just got into a little on questions and answers, and something that's probably going to be talked a lot about more headed into the offseason?
No, I don't think
Not
so.
at all. Yeah, you're right. This Cardinals team will just go out there and sign Shohei and Aaron Nola.
We're not
and
going to talk about them in the offseason.
bada boom, bada bing, huh? You
We're just going to show up when spring training goes, oh, hey, look, there's new pitchers on the roster.
spend $800 million in the offseason and say, let's go, boys.
Yeah, we could fix our problems that way.
The Cardinals have relied on the young pitching to go through the pipeline and come up and be a part of the major league roster. That's how they've built this. They did it with the position players as well. And we're seeing the fruits of their labor with the position players and Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker. And now you're going to get Mason Wynn soon. But the pitching seems to have hit a snag. And when you look at the roster decisions this season, that tells you everything you need to know. The Cardinals deem the young players that are ready for the major leagues as Matthew Liberatore, Zach Thompson, Jake Woodford, and Dakota Hudson. And let's go through that list if you'd like right now. Matthew Liberatore yesterday couldn't get out of an inning.
They have short rest. Like, it's a tough spot for Libby.
Dakota Hudson, the ace in waiting. Well, frankly, the pitch clock in the minors hasn't fixed his game.
Well, he didn't really
Zach
ever have a
Thompson
game, but okay.
was told to me as a starter, then was a bullpen arm, looked good as a bullpen arm, and then they put him back down to Memphis to be a starter again, and that has not gone well for Zach Thompson, and now he's back up probably as a bullpen arm. So that's the third one that's out of the conversation. And Jake Woodford's got a shoulder issue right now. Started the season as the fifth starter. Didn't look great. Wasn't bad, but it hasn't worked. That's it. Now you just keep cycling these guys because you don't have any other answers. Sure, McGreevy and Graceffo look like they're going to be coming up. But let's be honest about those two. We're probably waiting a little bit longer than we expected. Tink Hence just got to AA. Probably waiting a little bit longer. Cooper Jerpy, as you heard John Denton mention, he's dealing with an injury right now. If you don't believe me talking about these guys might be longer than we're expecting, listen to former Cardinals pitcher Jason Isringhausen.
Now, some of these guys can jump up there and do great, and that's great. But some guys need some more polishing. Like King Kent's is, a few years away. Still, he's 20 years old. He's not even 21 yet.
Yeah.
You can't compare him to Dwight Gooden back in the day. It's just not. It's not fair to him, and it's not fair to the McGreevy's and the Graceffos and the guys like that to compare these. I mean, we have comps for them, but still, they're a year or two away to where they can really help us and stay there. We always say the easy part is getting to the big leagues. The hard part is staying there for years and years and years. And that's what I want. When one of our kids leaves the minor leagues, I don't ever want to see him again. I want them to stay in the big leagues for the rest of their career, but it just doesn't happen that way.
Him saying that those guys are 1 to 2 years away and talking about Graceffo and McGreevy, and then also saying Tink Hence is a couple years away. What the Cardinals cannot do is they cannot rush those guys up through the pipeline. And I don't know if Oviedo would have ended up being one of these guys. He's the guy that I look to as and say, hey, look, they rushed Johan Oviedo. I think he's always going to be like a number 4 starter in a rotation. But the Cardinals really rushed him in his development in the pandemic.
Because they were desperate.
Because they were desperate. And that's why, like, the whole thing that's going on with Zach Thompson right now, where he was a reliever, sent him down to be a starter, and now they're calling up because they're desperate looking for arms. Like, I understand it, but, like, they cannot do that with some of their top-end prospects, McGreevy, Graceffo, who they're really high on, and Tink Hence, who they're really high on. Let those guys develop, and that's why when I talk about, we're talking about the pitching, is why I say you've got to be aggressive in the offseason, add guys to help the rotation for next season. Whether that means you're bringing in a bunch of one-year deals, just continue to do that add to the rotation now so you don't have to rush any of your prospects, and also look to supplement the depth in your system by trading away guys like Flaherty, Montgomery, Jordan Hicks, because that's what they got to do. They got to do what the St. Louis Blues said they're going to do, which is feed I don't remember exactly how Army said it, but they've got to feed two masters right now. They got to feed the minor league system with young pitching arms that they think that can help them out, and they've also got to feed the major league staff so they can remain competitive, which that is the ultimate goal for the St. Louis Cardinals, is be competitive and compete for the NL Central. It wouldn't shock me if they can get back with a good offseason to be in a team that could be within the 85 to 90 win mark next year.
Here's the problem with this, though, and this is my concern for this offseason. You really think you're just going to be able to go to the free agent market and get a guy for a 1 or 2 year deal?
I'm not talking about. It depends on what you're saying. Like a 1 or 2 year deal for an Aaron Nola? No, like no way in hell you're going to get Nola.
You're going to get. I'm trying to think of the comp for that. You're going to get the lesser version of Steven Matz on a 1 or 2 year deal.
That's not necessarily true. I mean, look at I'm drawing Michael Wacha, for example. Everybody wanted Michael Wacha.
Sure,
this
but he's not an ace.
He's been great. I didn't say come here and an ace.
Well, you have to have an ace if you're competing next season.
Not necessarily. If your goal is just to make the playoffs, they don't necessarily need these. Now they
Tanner,
need to go out there and add a guy.
Your rotation next year is Miles Michaelis and Steven Matz.
They made the playoffs last year without an ace.
Absolutely,
Agreed?
And look what happened to them.
Their goal is not a World Series next year. Agreed?
Yeah. Their goal is to be competitive.
Okay, and I'm not saying, look, they do need an ace, and I think they will go out and try to get an ace this offseason. But if they don't end up with an ace, it's not necessarily just a 2024 goal. It could be something that happens in 2025.
This feeding two masters right now, though, you have to pick one side because
the Blues didn't pick one side.
Absolutely.
They're doing both.
And well, they did though. They traded away these pending free agents and got draft
They're
picks.
claiming they're going to be competitive this year, right? They don't bring in Kevin Hayes if they don't think they're going to be competitive this year.
Absolutely, but they had the talent in place. They had talent in place in certain areas. The Cardinals don't have that in pitching, and we just heard Jason Isringhausen say
they have talent in place in offense. It's not like
the offense isn't getting it done for you. Your pitching is still struggling.
What I'm saying is they have the offense to where they can retool the pitching next year and be a competitive team.
Right.
And that's where I say, like, they have to spend money. They have to be willing to change their model and go out and spend. And I think they're going to end up with an ace. I truly believe they're going to make some sort of move, acquire somebody to be an ace. But it's okay if they settle on one or two pitchers to come in here on 1 or 2 year deals that have some upside to them that they can put in here and just fill out the rotation for next year. It's going to give them a chance to be competitive while also making sure they don't rush a Graceffo or a McGreevy. I
don't think my issue here, though, is I'm not sure you're going to acquire the pitchers that can make you competitive enough for 1 or 2 years to give you time with those guys, which is why I'm looking at this and saying, maybe it's time to take a reality check if you're the Cardinals and say, maybe we aren't going to be competing for the next couple of years. When Tink Hence and Graceffo and McGreevy and these guys are ready, yeah, we're probably going to be ready to accomplish a lot. But it's going to take us some time to get there. Sure, you can go out there and acquire certain players on a 1 or 2 year deals and bring them in as like a Jose Quintana and a Michael Wacha to make you competitive. But let's not get here and say like, oh, they get into the playoffs and they'll make it done, because the offense has had competent pitching this season and they haven't worked. The pitching has been bad. So if you think you're going to be able to go out there and find better than Jack Flaherty and better than Steven Matz and better than Jordan Montgomery on a 1 or a 2 year deal, I think you're sadly mistaken, which is why JP Morosi, if you saw him on Twitter earlier and you sent me this one, he stated, and this is JP Morosi, a trade deadline season, that the Cardinals are starting to investigate trading away some of their young Major League Baseball position players for trades to bring in pitching. That's the route you're going to have to do this, not free agency.
I don't disagree with that. I think they're going to have to do both. They're going to have to be willing to, whether it's at the deadline now or in the offseason, trade away some decent assets to go out and acquire a young, controllable arm. It's why they are connected to the Seattle Mariners. But they're also going to go and spend in free agency. And again, there are recent history of success deals on 1-2 year deals. Carlos Rodon, before going to the Yankees, was on a 1 or 2 year deal that had an option on it with the San Francisco Giants. They may not decide to spend big on Aaron Nola because they don't like the years, but they can fill out the rotation on a 1-2 year deal with some of these free agents. I think everything is open to whether they can go and say, all right, let's go give Aaron Nola a 7-year deal that pays him a ton of money. Or let's settle for 1-2 year deals and let's go trade for a Shane Bieber to fill the role as an ace. Or let's go trade for a young, controllable arm with some upside. George Kirby's a name that got kind of pulled out in John Morosi's report earlier today. But go and find a young, controllable arm. Maybe it's in Seattle's rotation. Maybe it's a Dylan Cease you go and acquire for. Like, they're going to have to do both if they're going to fix the rotation for next season. This isn't as simple as, go out and sign 4 free agents and that's how they're going to fix rotation. They're not going to do that. They're going to look to get a controllable arm, I believe, via trade, and then they're probably going to sign 2 free agents. That would be my guess, and then you've got Michaelis and Matz that fill out the rotation.
Well, you're going to have to do something, because if you do this same thing again, or you sit there and you go out there and you try and accomplish a couple of pieces and say, well, we've got the internal options, then you're going against what Jason Isringhausen just said. And I, for one, am looking at this right now wondering that taking a step back might be the better option for them unless they can be aggressive via the trade. And that is going to be the way for them to accomplish it. But you're going to have to be you're going to have to be more aggressive than what people are just anticipating, John, as they like to be. Like, you're not just trading Tommy Edman, Paul DeJong, and Tyler O'Neill and getting an ace. You're going to be moving on from Nolan Gormans and Brendan Donovans, and it's probably not going to be pretty. But now you're taking a hit to your offense to improve your pitching, and you're going to be doing this balance with this Cardinals team.
What the Cardinals can't do, and that's why, like, when you say they got to be super aggressive in trading guys to help supplement the rotation, they're going to have to find that fine line because you know where they are right now in terms of their timeline is where they got stuck in 2018, where they had as much pitching depth they could ask for, but they had no offense. So what did they do? They go out and they have to make the trade for Marcell Ozuna. And it didn't work on Ozuna's part, and they parted away with Alcantara and Zach Gallen. And that trade really stings. They're in the same spot now, but it's just in reverse. They have the offensive pieces. They've got one more, maybe two more in their minor league system with Mason Wynn coming. They just have no pitching, and that's why they can't make this. They've been on this teeter-totter where it is, okay, we've got the pitching pieces that we need, we just don't have the offense. And then they make the trades necessary, and then they have the offense, and now they don't have the pitching. They've got to find a way to make a trade that doesn't completely pull away from the main core of their offense and also be able to help get this teeter-totter back to balance where they've got good pitching and they've got an offense.
That's why this might be a longer window than people originally thought. One window that's not as long is the St. Louis Blues because they're building their roster to win now, right, T-Bone?
They're feeding two masters.
Absolutely. But are they building,
just like the Cardinals?
Are they building their roster similar to what they had in 2021-2022 season? And if they are, is it better than that roster? We'll discuss that next year on 101 ESPN. I mean, the amount of texts that came in when I teased that saying, oh, Ferrario bashes the Cardinals and it is going to pump up the Blues. That's exactly what I'm going to do right now, because are the Blues building their roster like the roster they had when they took Colorado to Game 6 and lost in the second round?
Didn't win a cup. It couldn't have been a good roster.
There's a water bottle problem. If somebody wouldn't have run into Jordan Binnington, we'd be talking about a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. It's pretty obvious the Blues are going offensive heavy because they can't move on from defensemen because of the no trade clauses. Maybe they still can. Maybe something happens. But as it stands now, your offseason has been bringing in Kevin Hayes and moving forward. But as much as some might look at that and say, well, that's kind of a depressing offseason. Grant, you said it yesterday. I think some people just needed to temper their expectations going into the offseason of what was actually going to happen. And why I'm optimistic about it is when you look at the way that they built that roster in 21-22, yeah, it had defensemen that you thought were going to be better. Nick Leddy, Torrey Krug, when you got Nick Leddy in the trade deadline, Parayko Falk, those guys performed well. But it was all about offense. It was about, 9 20-goal scorers. You had Vladdy putting on one hell of a season. You had a couple of others, Ivan Barbashev with 60 points, and you were thinking, well, you can win with offense. I expect that same roster from the Blues this season. And if you think of the pieces that exited and were brought in, you can see the similarities. Like a Kevin Hayes filling the role of Ryan O'Reilly. Nobody will fill that role because Ryan O'Reilly was a Selke Trophy winner, one of the best defensive forwards in the game. But Kevin Hayes is more offensively inclined than Ryan O'Reilly at his best. I don't know what he's going to be. We have to wait to find out. He's got the curse of number 12 right now. We just found out. Our guy Millsy told us that he's wearing number 12, so I hope the Zach Sanford stuff stays away. No disrespect.
Hey, he's a Stanley Cup champion.
Sorry, Sandy. Come to the Garden, Sanford. But if you get Kevin Hayes performing to Ryan O'Reilly's level, at least on the offensive side, there's another 20-goal score for you. Jakub Vrana, we heard from Kevin Allen, who covered the Detroit Red Wings, saying everybody in Detroit expected him to be a 40-goal scorer. Obviously, off-ice issues. We saw Vrana post-trade deadline performed really well. I don't think he puts up Vladdy's 82 points, but could you get another 20-goal scorer in there? I would say maybe. And then you talk about Ivan Barbashev, and that's the part that I just don't know, because Barbashev was somebody you didn't expect. But I also didn't expect Sammy Blais to be a goal-per-game player post-trade deadline. Same can be said with Kasperi Kapanen's performance. If those four, and again, we're living in what-ifs right now, but if those four put up offensive numbers for this team, you're right back to where you were in that 21-22 season where you're relying on offense to win you hockey games. The bigger issue is, can they perform at that offensive level?
Yeah, I think when you look at the Blues and the way they're constructed this year, the way they're going to win is how it was similar to 21-22, where they're going to outscore their problems. Because I think defensively, they're still going to be a liability both on the blue line and just when you look at their forward group. That forward group was not good defensively last year in terms of playing a 200-foot style game. So I don't think that's going to be fixed. I think the way they're going to win, and if they're going to get back into the playoff picture and be kind of that third or fourth best team in the Central Division, they're going to outscore their problems, kind of like they did in 21-22. Now, where I kind of push back on that, because I could see where you can kind of look at it and go, okay, maybe Hayes gets you to adds another 20-goal score, maybe Vrana a full year, Kapanen maybe. Where I push back on it is I just don't know if they're going to have the special teams to do it. Because remember in 21-22, they had one of the best power plays in the NHL, and they were great on the penalty kill that year too.
And you know what that power play was a result of? Having Torrey Krug play. I mean, Torrey Krug that season had 43 points in 64 games and was a plus 23.
And they had that one-time shot at David Perron. So where it'll be interesting to see is if the special teams can get back to that level, because they were bottom 12 in both power play and PK percentage last season. If they can get that to be bumped up a little bit, then yeah, I think they can potentially outscore their problems defensively, and I think that's how they win in 23-24, like they did in 21-22. So
30.
They're going to have to. That's how they're going to get back to the playoffs. They're going to have to outscore their problems.
Yeah,
I agree that that's where they're headed with this. They're obviously looking more towards the offensive side and hoping that's going to outscore their problems. But I don't know if I'm on board with the idea that they're gaining enough traction to be right back where they were in 21, because yes, the Kevin Hayes, Ryan O'Reilly comp, it's there. Kevin Hayes is not Ryan O'Reilly defensively, at least. I know you said offensively is where he's going to maybe be right there with O'Reilly, but he's not. You don't have a David Perron on your team right now. You forget about Tyler Bozak as well, who is a role player. He's not someone who's, going to wow you, but he was a playoff performer for the Blues. He was solid at all times. I mean, we're talking about Tarasenko, who was a phenomenal goal scorer that season. And I know you said if Jakub Vrana ends up, living up to his full potential. You have a lot of ifs there and a lot of question marks. I know we have Sammy Blais right now on the team who really outshined what was expected of him last season.
Don't you get negative on my Sammy Blais.
I'm not getting negative on Sammy Blais. Listen, I love Blazy. Don't go there. I'm just saying that we're comparing what we have right now to what the Blues had in 2021. And I don't know if the comparison is all the way there yet. You go a couple years down the road, 2-3 years, and you have Zachary Dean, who might be similar to the next Ivan Barbashev. You have Dalibor Dvorsky, who will be breaking into the league, hopefully, at Patrick that time. Kane. And, yeah, exactly, the next Patrick Kane. But you have your offensive dynamo in Dalibor Dvorsky, you hope, coming up. Then you can start to see the comparisons start to fall into place. But as of right now, I don't see it.
The only reason that, and again, I'm maybe more optimistic on this than what we see, because when the season starts, it all falls apart, and we're talking about it the same way that we're talking about the Cardinals right now. But you look at what you could get the best out of, and that's Jakub Vrana, who, frankly, he had 12 goals in 20 games for that team at the end of the season.
Good.
Very impressive. Sammy Blais put up those types of numbers as well. And look, that was career years. All of this resides on your defense performing better, and that's what Doug has basically talked about is, can we get the best out of these guys who had a bad year next year? Can you get it from Krug and Parayko and Falk and Leddy? Because if you can't, then we're talking about the same thing, where you can score 5 goals, but you're giving up 7 because they're backdoor tap-ins. But you mentioned Zachary Dean, and I wanted to bring his name up because you got the chance to talk with him, Grant, and he comped his play to Ivan Barbashev. And I listened to Tim Taylor yesterday, his press conference that he held on Tuesday, and he comped him, and this is his words, not mine. He comped him to Doug Gilmour. For those that know Doug Gilmour, played for the Blues, played for the Toronto Maple Leafs, Hall of Famer, incredible player. He didn't say he's going to become Doug Gilmour, but what he said was he plays like him. Two-way, has the offense, good defensively, rough type of player.
What you want in the playoffs.
Exactly. And I've mentioned it before. I wonder if he's one of those guys that can make the team out of camp. But let's just look long-term picture here for that team. If they hit on Zachary Dean in terms of you traded away an Ivan Barbashev, great trade for them, but you got back this player who might be a better version of Ivan Barbashev. That's how you quick turn the retool. That's how you make this cycle go faster for this team. Identify somebody who's ready for the NHL, who's younger, who you're going to get cheaper, who can be effective sooner rather than later. And that's the part that can help this offense. If we're talking about guys like Vrana and Kapanen and Blais and all these players who could be 20-goal scorers, then you add in the complementary pieces. That's how you induce this offensively inclined team for Doug Armstrong, at least this season.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. What happens is all the good teams, when you talk about them in the NHL, what do? Or teams that can build on in a window, is you got to have good young cost control players.
And that's why,
and that's why, to your point, if they are right on Zachary Dean, then it's going to be huge for them, because he's a guy that can come up and be a effective player, whether it be Barbashev or Gilmour's type of game. But if it's similar to one of those guys, that is something that the St. Louis Blues need. Ivan Barbashev has always, when he was here, was always a player that was effective both in the regular season and in the playoffs. So we'll see how Dean's kind of path is. I'm not as optimistic that he's going to be here this year. I think he's probably a year away. But this camp is going to be one of those where he has the chance to try and win a job. And Doug Armstrong said that when we were in Nashville, when we had the chance to talk with him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I think, going back to the conversation of even just 2 years from now when the cap goes up, we're talking about all these prospects coming into the league in 2 years, and that's great. Imagine if we were able to have these players upcoming for next year with the roster that the Blues have right now. It's a completely different conversation. But add on to that the fact that the cap is going to be rising in 2 years, so you're going to have these prospects who are ready and coming up, and on top of that, you have some extra money to work with to go out in free agency and make something happen. Then you become competitive, and then you're really in the conversation of getting back to where they were in 21.
You're setting yourself up, but this upcoming season, you're going to have to hope that offense outplays defense and you get the best out of the defense, but some of these younger players could become contributing pieces. Graham Francis, Tanner Hendricks, hit him, Alex Ferrario. Cardinals are going into this all-star break. Is that the deadline if they're going to have to make some type of personnel move? I'm starting to wonder. We'll get to that next year on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Last night, the Cardinals fall 10-9 in disappointing fashion down in Miami. They had a lead in the ninth inning after Jordan Walker's go-ahead two-run homer in the top of the ninth, but in the bottom of the ninth, Jordan Hicks' error results in a Miami walk-off winner. Tonight, they'll look to rebound and avoid the sweep of the four-game series in Miami. It'll be Yuri Perez for the Marlins, who's 5-2 this season with a 2.47 ERA, and it'll be Jack Flaherty for the Cardinals. First pitch will be at 5:40. Today for the Blues, Hugh McGing signed a two-way one-year deal with the Blues. It'll be worth $775,000 at the NHL level this upcoming season. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Very rarely do I feel like changes in season end up working. It worked last year for a couple teams, but for the most part, it doesn't. There's an underlying issue with the team when they're struggling, and you would try to use the hey, has he lost the clubhouse, right? So the support of your veteran players, and you kind of watch that, and you have a feel for that, and it's hard to see from a fan perspective. Being outside of the club, you generally will have conversations with the players and you kind of get a feel. Do they have confidence in him? Do they have confidence in his decision-making or the communication skills with some of the players? How are they?
So that was Jim Duquette talking about when is the right time to fire a manager. And this was gaining a lot of steam, and then it died down. And then the steam started to pick back up over the last couple of days. And with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. And the reason it's picking back up, to me at least, is because of the decisions that Oli made the last couple of days. One was going to Adam Wainwright. Now, of course, you're going to stick with Adam Wainwright, but then we found out post-game that he had been dealing with this shoulder discomfort for a little while. But yet you kept running him back out there injured. And then last night to me was the biggest what the bleep moment when Matthew Liberatore got the call. Because Matthew Liberatore was starting on short rest, where you had Steven Matz, who had been performing well, available to start that game for you. Frankly, you could have gone to a Dakota Hudson if you wanted to, or even a Zach Thompson. But you opted to go, I get it, but you opted to go with somebody who had been struggling to get outs like crazy this season on short rest. That, to me, is a massive problem. And I'm not even sitting here wondering if Oli's lost the clubhouse. To me, that you can think whatever you want. You talk to people who are around that team on a daily basis, John Denton, Katie Wu, they'll tell you that they love Oli. Fine. But now we're getting to the point where you're making decisions that are costing the team. And I know you don't have any chance to get into this race. You're pretty much done. You're 16 games below 500. You're blowing games left and right. But when you're starting an injured pitcher who has been struggling all season consistently, and then when you go to a guy on short rest who like the jury is out. Matthew Liberatore is not a starter. That to me is a problem.
See, yes, Oli has had questionable moments this year. The whole reason I think this is gaining steam again is because it's about the time that the Cardinals fired Mike Matheny when things had gone south on him. So I think that's the whole reason it's gaining steam. And let's just be honest, because it's the first losing season in a long time, it's why it's gaining steam as well. Look, I understand what you're saying about the Liberatore decision. Like, I agree with you. I don't think they should start Liberatore yesterday, but let's have a moment of honesty real quick. I think that was one of those where it was, hey, look, man, we know we're done. Let's see what Libby looks like.
On short rest?
Yeah, but he threw 60 pitches the last time. Like he basically, the reason I asked John Denton earlier of have they considered moving him into a bullpen role, I mean, that was essentially what they just did, was they basically used him as a reliever who had thrown a lot of pitches, had 3 days off, and then could go back out there. Like, he should have been able to be more effective.
Two other guys that you could have used in that role.
But I don't think they want to use, so they don't want to use Thompson as a starter. I think he's probably going to go back down to the minors after the All-Star break when they can kind of reset everything. He's up here now, kind of break glass in case of emergency. Hudson's the one that I could understand the argument for. I was a little surprised they didn't go to Steven Matz. But again, they are out of it. Like, the decision-making on who started last night did not matter. Oli Marmol is not the problem that the St. Louis Cardinals, that if they fire him, Like, this is the deadline. If they're going to make this decision, it's going to have to be made by the All-Star break. And though I have had questions of Oli Marmol's decision-making, I still think he's got the clubhouse. And I think the Waino injury thing, I don't even think that's an Oli decision. I think that was more of a Waino decision than anybody else. I think Oli Marmol is going to be here after the All-Star break. I think he's going to, at minimum, coach out the rest of this season.
I'm with you on that.
And I think he should be here for potentially next season and trying to guide the Cardinals through this. I don't think Oli Marmol's the problem. I don't think if Tony La Russa, I don't think if Whitey Herzog were managing this team would be winning right now. I think it's a flawed roster, and that's not on the manager. I don't think Oli Marmol went from being a good manager last year that got the Cardinals into the playoffs to all of a sudden forgetting how to manage. This is not an Oli Marmol problem. Firing him right now does nothing for the St. Louis Cardinals. I think he's here after the All-Star break. I think he's here at minimum till the end of the season, and then we'll see what direction the St. Louis Cardinals decide to go.
My only issue with it, and look, if this happens again with the Blues, we just talked about this earlier in the show. I'll be saying the same thing. But when you get the same recurring problem all season and it's not getting fixed, that to me is somebody's in charge problem.
What would you say you want to see fixed that you think what are you referring to?
Well, that's the part. You do have a flawed roster, but running Matthew Liberatore out there on a consistent basis, it's obviously not working.
Roster issue,
absolutely. But you had other players you could have gone with. Steven Matz has pitched well for you to just give him that start.
So I don't disagree there, but like there's another spot in the rotation coming up. Like they're going to have 2 spots open. Who do you want to see?
Well, and that's
it's a flawed roster. I understand what you're saying. It's a flawed roster. It is more of Oli Marmol is not set up to have success right now. No matter who he plugs in to start, not on him. For all the clamoring of they've lost their fundamentals, which I agree with. They are bad fundamentally this year with defensive miscues. Don't forget, Oli Marmol was a part of Mike Schilt's staff that turned that around. So it's not like Oli Marmol is a guy that's going to go out there and say, we're not going to care about fundamentals in spring training. They work on that.
Well, and here's the other thing with Oli, too. And for people that think I'm saying fire Oli at the All-Star break, I'm not, because firing Oli is just doing the same thing, because you got to look at the person who's in charge, and that's the flawed roster we're talking about with John Mozeliak looking at this team and figuring it out. That's the starting point of this, and that's not going to get done at the All-Star break. If that happens, it's an off-season thing. But what I am saying are the decisions that start to get concerning. Now, on the other side of that topic is looking at the Cardinals and what they're doing and using the phrase "trust the process," and that was a phrase that Greg Amsinger used earlier today on opening drive. Take a listen.
What they want to hear is fire Marmol, get rid of the entire coaching staff. Mozeliak's got to go. All the crazy talk that's on social media right now, simmer down. There's a reason why the Cardinal baseball is actually so successful. It's boring because it doesn't overreact. It's not emotional. Cardinal baseball isn't emotional. So take the emotion out of this. Steady Eddie. Cardinal baseball's the tortoise. Let the Marlins be the hare. Let them have their moment right now. They'll be 30 games under 500 a year and a half from now. Don't worry about it. The Cardinals are going to get back on track. Are they going to be in the playoffs this year? Probably not, but just trust the process. And I know no one wants to hear that right now. That is not what fans in St. Louis think is smart baseball analysis.
Now is the absolute perfect time to start panicking. And I'm not worried that the Marlins are the hare and you're the tortoise. I'm worried that the Cincinnati Reds are the tortoise and you're the hare, to where they slow played this, where they had all the players, they made the big trades, they brought in the prospects, and now it's all clicking for them. And now you see continued success. And maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe Cincinnati blows up. But now is the absolute perfect time to stress and not trust the process, because the process has gotten you here. You've trusted the process. If that same statement would have been made 2 years ago, I would have said absolutely trust the process, because we've seen the history of success. Now I'm more worried that what we're seeing this year is the start of this trend. And that's why panic is starting to be more at the forefront of my brain than what Greg Amsinger is saying.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with it's a start of a trend in terms of them going through like a bunch of losing seasons, but I do think it is time for a little bit of overreaction from the front office. And when I mean that, I mean what we've talked about for checks notes since probably opening day about
spring training probably.
Yeah, they need to get aggressive. They need to be aggressive in free agency or on the trade market to help retool this pitching staff. Going with the process, when he says that, what I picture as the process is, we go and sign one free agent and we try to hope that we get a bounce back year from somebody in our minor leagues. Maybe McGreevy comes up and can start. Liberatore decides to start in the rotation. They can't do that. It's time to get uncomfortable from the Cardinals front office perspective in terms of handing out big contracts to starting pitchers or going out and looking for a deal that the 1-year deal that I mentioned is more of one of those words. Not a 1-year deal on a guy that you look at and go, okay, I know he's going to pitch to contact. No, a 1-year deal to where it's like, hey, the upside is he's going to have a ton of swing and miss, and he's going to be a guy that can have like a 3 ERA. But the downside is like he could have a 5 ERA and deal with injuries. Like they're going to have to take risks that they have not been comfortable doing in years prior. And the reason they're going to have to do that is so they can turn this thing around, because this is not a simple fix. This is going to take aggressive management decisions from John Mozeliak to get the Cardinals back into, and I'm not even saying World Series contention, but into contention of being in this race in the NL Central next year, because the Cincinnati Reds are here to stay, and also getting back into just being in that playoff conversation. Again, I don't think next year is about building a World Series team, and I know a lot of fans do not want to hear that at all. It's more about building the team to get them back into the playoff conversation. The exact same conversation we just had about Doug Armstrong on this offseason. What was his goal? To try and remain competitive and get back into the postseason by sneaking it. That's going to be the same conversation that the Cardinals brass should be talking about going into this offseason. And hell, they could win the division, because the Reds, though I think they're here to stay, I'm not sure they're going to be such a juggernaut that you can't beat them.
Yeah, but it seems the Central's beginning to get a little bit more competitive around you. And that's the concern of trusting the process and playing the same way you've been and just winning the NL Central, because the Cincinnati Reds might not turn into a juggernaut, but they're obviously better than you. The Pittsburgh Pirates, not a juggernaut, but they've performed better than you. Chicago Cubs, not a juggernaut, but they are a juggernaut in terms of their wallet. And right now, they've performed better than you. It's you and the Brewers right now competing. And that's the concern of trusting the process for me when other teams around you, especially when your process has been, well, the NL Central is weak, so we can compete no matter what. I don't know how many more years that carries over for you until you start putting some of that product in play. And maybe it is. Maybe there is a little bit of a down spiral for Cincinnati and for Pittsburgh, and it does go back to normal in a year or two. But what I don't want to happen is you maintaining this level of process that you think is working while other teams continue to improve around you, because it's just a matter of time before Cincinnati decides, well, now might be the time for us to strike hot and get ourselves a top pitching on the free agent market, or Pittsburgh looks at it that way, which I don't think they will, because they don't like spending money. But
they don't like talent.
They don't like talent. That is very true. But maintaining the same, trusting the process, I think has changed now that the NL Central is not what it was 2-3 years ago. And that's where things start to get a little sticky for this Cardinals team. Tanner Hendrickson, Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. It's BK Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We got our YouTube channel, live YouTube channel with the cameras in studio at 101 ESPN STL. And we got our Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. We can jump in on the conversation. We get to see Tanner and company sing Believe It or Not in a little bit, but we're diving into the junk drawer next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. It is BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. And we hand things over to T-Bone as we head into the junk drawer.
Do you guys like roller coasters? Big roller coaster guys?
Yeah, unless it flips. If it flips, I vomit. So
I do now.
Stay away from those.
Well, so anytime I go to like Six Flags or anything, I don't eat the entire day. I refuse to get myself to that point. I
do that too, but it's mostly because I don't want to have to be in the bathroom the whole time.
Yeah. That's also fair.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say because you don't want to pay for it, but that also fair too. Well, this may change your love for roller coasters. I hate roller coasters because I'm terrified of heights. In Wisconsin, there was a Forest Country Festival in Crandon, Wisconsin, and they had a roller coaster that did one of those kind of loop-de-loops. And I don't know if you guys saw this. They got stuck at the top at the loop there, and they were hanging upside down, and they were stuck there for hours.
Yeah, that's why I don't do those.
Before they were able to have any kind of rescue crew come out to go and get them. Now, there's only 8 people on the roller coaster, but count me out.
8 people on the roller coaster? Is that all it fit, or that's all that was on it?
That's all that was on it.
Okay, I was going to say, that's already a shady roller coaster if only 8 people can ride it.
It's like at your county fair or something.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
That sounds like a nightmare to me.
Oh, yeah, no, that's why I don't do the roller coasters that flip, because I am worried that it gets stuck while I'm upside down.
I'd be more scared of falling. And like you're hanging up there, like I feel like falling down.
If I'm hanging upside down, unbuckling myself and like just dangling there. So at least I'm not upside down.
I don't really worry about that too much. Like, I have the same thought process about that as I do, like, for people who are scared going on planes. Like, you drive in a car every day on the highway, you have a much better chance of getting into a wrek or something bad happening in a car.
I can control that. Somebody else is controlling my life on an airplane.
I don't know if I would rather having Alex control that, though.
I'm a very good driver. Tanner was when he was riding with me. He's like, man, you go in and out of lanes a lot. I said, yeah, because I don't like being behind slow people.
I could hear the Mario Kart music in my head.
You should see me do one of those spins around a turn. Oh man, am I good at those?
I was waiting for him to throw a red shell out the window.
I've had my moments in golf carts, but that's because of other reasons I can't speak of.
What are the odds that something bad happens like that on a roller coaster? Very minimum,
but I want to be controlling it, exactly. And that's why I'm not sure. I'll give you a great story. So when we were younger, it's a Branson story. Surprise, surprise.
Who could see it?
You know the things that you bungee jump with, that it's skydiving essentially, where you're going back and forth on the thing. They take you up and then they drop you. So my sister and her friend were doing it, and I'll never forget this because it was at a mini golf course, and like on the strip. They're like, let's go do this. So they went there, got them all hooked up, lifted them all the way to the top, and then they brought them back down. And they came back down, and the guy's like, oh, we forgot to put your safety strap on. And then they went back up and did it. And I said, you guys are insane. There's no way I would have done that.
I thought you were going to say he was joking.
No, he wasn't joking. He had to put the safety strap on them and then raised them back up, and they went for it. Don't know why, but that's why certain things, like roller coasters are one thing. I expect it to be okay, and if not and I die, well, there's nothing I can do about that. Airplanes, look, it's a form of transportation. But certain things that I can make the decision to get on, like if it's a roller coaster that does the flips or if it's that skydiving thing, I'm going to back away from that because this is just me being smart, and I'm not going to take that chance.
I'm with you there. I'm so terrified of heights, even a big water slide. I can't even walk up the stairs to go do it. Yeah, dude, I'm terrified.
Tanner, have you ever done those swings at Six Flags where you go up in the air and you're swinging around?
Once again, my daughter wanted to do those.
I can't do it, man. It's not so much the spinning. The spinning I can handle. The teacups, I've done those. And
I can't do that either.
Is it? Yeah, it's you or BK.
Yeah,
maybe
me.
Both. Hate the teacups because they just feel sick to their stomach after doing the spinning. I don't feel that way, but when it comes to heights, no chance at all. But the weird thing is, I don't mind flying, but I can't do a roller coaster. I can't do even a big tall water slide. I won't go up the stairs to do it.
On top of your roller coaster, did you see the other story? And I forgot what state this was in, but the roller coaster that the metal pole that was holding it up had split in half.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody videotaped it, and while the roller coaster is going, this pole is shifting back and forth. That's the kind of stuff that, no way. I'm out. I don't want to take the chance.
Happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what also happens? Have you ever seen Final Destination?
No, I hate scary movies, but I've seen what happens.
How I am
that's
with
true.
movies.
You're like Tanner with movies. You've never seen anything good.
I just don't like scary movies, man.
I don't want to cheat death.
Get scared.
That's true. I don't want to cheat death, and me getting on roller coasters that I don't trust, that's me cheating death, and I'm not going to try that.
I'll go to Six Flags by myself.
Yes, you will do Six Flags by yourself. I've done Six Flags plenty of times. Turkey
roller
legs are
coasters, though.
outstanding. No, some of them I do, some of them I
you
don't.
get over it,
Look, I
guess.
risk my
Okay.
life on Screaming Eagle every time I step on that thing because it's like 150 years
that.
old.
I respect that.
But I'm not going to go on Mr. Freeze because I don't need to be stuck upside down for 45 minutes to an hour until somebody comes out and gets it started.
That's fair.
And that's
a good
how,
story, though.
That's how I live longer.
No,
not
it's
being
not.
optimistic.
How's it a great story?
It's a great story.
reflect on.
Yeah, until I pass out because all the blood rushed to my head.
Yeah.
It's all part of the story.
I guess that's true. Grant Francis, who likes to cheat death. Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Jordan Walker continues to impress. And now we're getting to the point where he's impressing in terms of the big stage, National League Rookie of the Year. We'll get into that conversation next year on 101 ESPN.
Contreras leads. He goes the pitch. Swing drive. Hammer left. Jordan Walker hits a mammoth home run. Oh, what a trip around the bases. The Cardinals stun the Marlins down to their last strike and take a 2-run lead on a bomb of
So that was Jordan Walker's home run last night, courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest. At that moment, I didn't think that the Cardinals were going to have a bounce-back moment and turn their season around. But what I did think was, man, they got something special in Jordan Walker. And should be no surprise to all of us because he's been touted as one of the best prospects in all of baseball. And we've seen that this season with his on-base streak, with the ability to get multiple hits in multiple situations, and then when you see the power. But that one last night, that hit was the clutch moment that it felt like so many fans were hyping up with Oscar Taveras, and then, of course, his unfortunate passing where the Cardinals didn't really get to see that. Now you've got that once again in Jordan Walker, and you're starting to see the potential of this team of Jordan Walker's talent, because if you've got that bat that you're turning into a superstar, if he becomes a superstar, which right now it seems that way, that expedites this timeline, T-Bone, that we've been talking about of, are they in this competitive window? Do they think that they can just turn it around by next season? When you've got a Jordan Walker playing like the way he has this season, which, what is it now, 47 games, you got a 286 batting average, you got a 119 OPS plus, Jordan Walker is looking like the player that we've expected out of him all season.
Yeah, Jordan Walker's been unbelievable. If you want one bright thing to look at for the Cardinals, it's him. And I know he even had the demotion, and you can debate whether or not the Cardinals should have done that or not. But look, he's hitting the ball. His hard hit percentage is at 52%. The league average is slightly below 40. Like, he's been everything that the Cardinals said. It's a big, tall kid that's going to hit for some power, and he just crushes the baseball. And you're seeing that. I mean, you look at his baseball savant page, 93rd percentile in max exit velocity, 93rd percentile in hard hit percentage. Like, he's just crushing the baseball. And since he's been called up, I think he's been better in terms of chase rate, recognizing pitches as well. And with that big home run last night, it's the clutch gene that you're talking about, being able to come up in a big situation, facing a really tough lefty, and take that fastball that was inside and drill that thing into left center. So he's going to only get better from here. And like his defense, it's the one knock on him right now, but that's going to get better too.
I honestly feel like it's improved, at least over the last couple of weeks compared to what it was. Sure. Okay. Good. Good talk.
He's been out there. Yeah. I'll give you that.
No, that's Juan Yepez, and he's not with the team anymore.
He's better than Juan Yepez. I'll say that.
There.
But I think when you look at just his talent and just trying to look at how he's going to project forward, I think he's going to do a better job of keeping the ball off the ground. Heck, he's done a better job of that since he got recalled. And, like, I know he hasn't hit for a ton of power in terms of, like, looking at home runs and doubles. Like, his slugging percentage is a little lower than you probably would expect at 452. I think it's going to get higher. I think he's a guy that's going to have 20 to 30 home run potential. It's just going to take time for him to mold into that, because you got to remember, he's only 21 years old.
Right. Well, and he's just a different prospect than other guys. Like, you're not looking at it like Nolan Gorman was when he came up, where you were just expecting home run after home run. Of course, Jordan Walker has the power, but you're expecting more of just the well-rounded batter, which he has shown the ability to. And, watching Cincinnati, I watched a little bit of Cincinnati's game. I guess it was last night or a couple of nights ago. You see what Cincinnati's doing because of Eli De La Cruz, and you wonder why the Cardinals haven't been able to accomplish that. And then, of course, you see how awful their pitching is. It says, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But the energy that they got from Eli De La Cruz, the moment he stepped into the big leagues, they've just found ways to win. You just wonder, as the season progresses and going into next season, if this team can capture that with Jordan Walker and maybe Mason Wynn, what Cincinnati captured, and even an Arizona team that's captured it with Corbin Carroll. You capture a little extra energy when you have young prospects that are living up to expectations. And now that Jordan Walker's doing it, it's unfortunate that the pitching sucks so much, because now would have been the moment that you pounced on Jordan Walker's ability.
Yeah, I think if the Cardinals had just decent pitching, one, I think they're still in the division race, but two, more importantly, I think there's more kind of recognition, not just from the national media, but from us as well, as to what Jordan Walker's doing. I mean, as a rookie, he's hitting 286. That's hard to do. There are not a lot of guys hitting 300 in the majors.
Gorman last year.
Yeah, and Gorman, and look at Gorman. Like, Gorman is a player that you love the power that he possesses, but he's going to go through ups and downs. His batter profile is, hey, he's going to be hot and could hit 10 home runs in a matter of 15 games, and he may not record 10 hits in 15 games, right, just the way his batter profile is. Jordan Walker is going to be a guy that is there's going to be a level of consistency to him. I don't know if he's going to be a 286 hitter, but he's going to be a guy that's going to hit for decent average. His on base is going to be carried by that, and then he's going to even add on more power as he goes along. So, yeah, I think when you look at the Cardinals, if they are a winning team, it is going to be, one, because Jordan Walker's living up to expectations, but two, he's also providing some of that youthful spark that the Cardinals have been looking for in the last couple of years.
Well, and I'll add this too. One of the best things I like about Jordan Walker right now is on a team that's struggling so much, and you can tell the anxiety and the nerves are there. Just look at what happened to Jordan Hicks last night in a big moment.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, nothing pops out in my head when I say that. But then you look at Jordan Walker, and when you're in those pressure situations and you're down to your final strike of the game, he's the guy you want there. He's one of the guys that you want there on this team, and he's a rookie. So at this young of an age for a prospect like Jordan Walker, who's no longer really a prospect, but to get in there and be one of your better players in high leverage situations, and you mentioned the clutch factor, that is a very promising thing to see out of Jordan Walker.
Troll or text? From the 314, I expect more. From Jordan Walker.
The pitching, yeah.
Well, I think the pitching's expecting more from the pitching. I don't know how much more you could expect from Jordan Walker this season. Maybe I could hear the argument of more home runs because he has still hit the ball on the ground. But even when he hits the ball on the ground, he hits it so hard that you're thinking, man, the more reps he gets, the better he's going to become. I'm not sure you can end, because I was the guy last year after the rookie year of Nolan Gorman saying, I wanted a little bit more from him. And I was in the minority because I remember BK T-Bone, you were as well, thinking, man, he had a really good rookie year. I just thought there should have been a little bit more from Nolan Gorman. I don't see myself saying that with Jordan Walker, especially what he went through in terms of being sent down after he was performing well and then brought back up and then has been performing since. I'm not sure you can expect any more out of Jordan Walker, at least in his rookie season.
No, I don't think so either. I think this is kind of like, if I'm being honest, exceeding what my expectation was for him.
Absolutely.
Because I think Jordan Walker, I thought coming into the year he was going to be a stud and had a chance to be a guy that could be a contender for NL Rookie of the Year. But, I mean, I knew he was a rookie, and he wasn't even 21 when the season started. He celebrated his birthday midway through the year. So I kind of expected him to be like a 250 hitter. You would see spurts where he hits for average and maybe a little bit of power, but you would see a lot of the struggles that you saw kind of at the back end of his first stint here with the club, where he was really struggling getting on top of the baseball. And that may happen again. We'll see what happens in the coming months as the season goes along. But I think he's exceeded what expectations were. I think a lot of fans got kind of...
Maybe they viewed it as a rookie of the year.
Walker.
Yeah, I could tell.
And I think that's fair. Like, if you think rookie of the year, you're thinking like a guy that's going to have a 850 OPS.
Yeah, look at Corbin Carroll, because that's your rookie of the year.
So
although Ellie De La Cruz may steal that.
Yeah, I can understand where fans kind of come from, but I think he's exceeded what his expectations were. Now, if you're saying you want more from him in the future, I think that's fair. I think he's going to show more power as he starts to
but that's
grow
the
into
future.
his body.
And you can't predict that, but you got a guy right now performing as a rookie as best as you can ask. Now,
real quick, I just looked this up too because someone on the text line, and we kind of talked about him being comp to this
Derek
player
Lee.
when we were talking about him. Yeah, Derek Lee from, I think it was a 618. Yeah, 618 that had that. They said, he kind of reminds me of Derek Lee, and that was a comp we had kind of talked about early on. First full season for Derek Lee, which was in 1998 before I was born. He ended up hitting 233 and had a 732 OPS and was below league average at a 96 OPS plus. Jordan Walker is hitting 286, has an 804 OPS, and is 19% above league average. Like, he's even ahead of the time frame for what Derek Lee was, and that's why, like, I can't sit here and say that the Cardinals or fans should have been expecting more from him. I think he's exceeding expectations.
Now, one guy that we don't know where he falls into this, maybe he hasn't lived up to him at this point, has been Ivan Herrera. And Ivan Herrera is having himself one hell of a season in AAA. He's hitting 308 with a 432 on base percentage and a 989 OPS. And he got called up after the Waino injury and the Andrew Kisner injury, and Ivan Herrera's up here. Now, I, for one, didn't expect to see much of Ivan Herrera, and just basically holding the spot until Andrew Kisner returns, especially going into this All-Star break. But Katie Wu, our Cardinals insider for The Athletic, seems to view this differently. This was her piece earlier today. It says, quote, the Cardinals will need to give Herrera, their top catching prospect, a true chance at the big league level to see what they have in him. If Herrera thrives, the Cardinals could consider using 3 catchers and building in more designated hitter days for Contreras, at least until the trade deadline. Are you expecting that? Because I'm not. I would say between now and the All-Star break, we see Herrera behind the plate as a starter once.
I think it's either going to be once or twice, and I think if he plays well in that 1 or 2 games, that they could go to that 3-catcher route that Katie mentioned there in her piece. Because I think they want to know what they have in Von Herrera. I mean, let's be honest. You're carrying 3 catchers, and it's not Tres Barrera who doesn't have a long-term future here in St. Louis. It's about seeing what you have in the prospect in Von Herrera, and also potentially showcasing him to other MLB evaluators, because they're not in this race. Like they're right now, it's about the future. And what do you want to know about the future? You want to know what you have in your young guys. So that's why Von Herrera, if he plays well in 1 game, 2 games, then I think there's a chance that they could continue with 3 catchers. And I do expect him to get some reps. I think there's a chance he's starting tonight. We haven't seen a lineup.
Yeah, I would expect tonight because it's a night game.
I think he could start a game in Chicago as well against the White Sox. I just think when you look at it, they're going to continue to kind of operate with Willson Contreras like they have been, where he's going to probably catch 2 games and get a DH game, or 3 or 4, whatever they want to do. And I think they want to know what they have in Herrera, because he's been really impressive at the plate, and also the news of, hey, he's doing a better job in his game calling and with his pitch sequencing and his pitch framing. Why not give him a shot, see what he looks like? And again, it doesn't hurt, because if he's bad, you send him back down, and if he's good, then it just helps boost his trade value. Or if you want to decide, hey, maybe he's a part of the future and the backup catcher, then maybe you look to move Kisner in the offseason.
If he's here, play him. Don't play this 3 catchers thing, because all that means is the third guy's maybe going to get 1 game over a 2 or 3 week span. If he's
Do you mind that if it's Contreras or if it's Kisner that gets that?
No, but if you're going to go down,
then I don't think that's an issue. Then if you're going to go 3 catchers,
well, then why even have Kisner? You should be using that roster spot for something else. You're basically saying Kisner's nothing.
I think there's an argument there of when they had Barrera up here of why are they wasting that roster spot when you weren't using him, because they were contending. They're not contending right now. So it's okay to carry 3 catchers, because Kisner would be in the role where they desperately needed a 3rd catcher in the game where he got hurt. And that's fine. Like, it's okay to have 3 catchers in this scenario, because I don't think they have any other pieces really down in the minor leagues that could fill that spot that you go, I want to know what this guy is.
Frankly, you've put all your eggs into the Willson Contreras basket. I'd be playing Contreras from now until the end of the season with the scheduled off days, because Contreras is going to have to figure this thing out because he's your starting catcher. And if that's the case, Herrera's really not. You're hoping he's not a backup catcher. So in this sense, I'm going to be looking to trade him. And maybe you do showcase him between now and August 1st. But that's why if he's here, play him. Because if you're going to showcase it, you need to get enough reps for him so that teams know exactly what they're trying to accomplish. Believe it or not, you can send us your texts at 314-399-9646. You can also send your scenarios over on our YouTube live chat at 101 ESPN STL. Tanner and company sing next here on 101 ESPN.
Yeah, a little selfish there. I won't lie.
Tanner's the Mariah Carey of this group. Once he gets into it, he becomes a diva and isn't involved with anything.
To be fair, I started this segment and I started playing this song, and both BK and Alex were like, "Oh, this is terrible. Why would I do this?" And then all of a sudden, now you look like, I don't know, 6 months later, we're singing the song.
If we're going to play this game, to be also fair, I came up with the idea, but
you didn't have the song, so
Well, I've got next week too to figure it out. So
go listen.
Grant's going to have to figure this one out before next week.
Every day when you go for your walk, turn the song
old man
I'll
walk.
make sure to listen to that song at least once per day.
You'll stop walking real quick. 314-399-9646. That is our Air Comfort Service text line. And if you haven't tuned out after watching me and Tanner sing, you can head on over to our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL, where you can join in on the chat with us. T-Bone, let's start it off. What do you got for us on Believe It or Not today?
Believe it or not, both Jordan Montgomery and Jack Flaherty will be dealt, and the Cardinals will get a pitching prospect that will be on, from one of those trades, will be on the opening day roster next year.
I'm going to believe this one. I actually wonder if Seattle is interested in Jordan Montgomery. Maybe you pull the Doug Armstrong deal where you can do a little bit of both, and you ship Jordan Montgomery and Jordan Hicks over to Seattle, maybe a position player, and get one of their young pitchers. I know that Morosi mentioned that George Kirby is probably off the table, but who is that 6'6" kid that I liked? Logan something?
Was it Logan Gilbert?
Logan Gilbert. I think one of those younger pitchers in Seattle's system could be a part of a big deal, and the Cardinals swing that way. So I'm going to believe this one, not bet this one.
I'm not going to believe this, because I think it's going to be a separate deal. I think the deals for Montgomery and Flaherty are to bring in prospects, bring in maybe a young arm that's close, but I don't think it's a guy that would be close enough to be pitching next year. I think if they're making a deal at the deadline to get that guy that's starting next year, it's in a separate move. Maybe it is Seattle that they are connected to, but I don't think Monty's going that way. I mean, I don't see Seattle wanting a rental in their starting pitching.
Yeah.
So I'm just not sure that's how it's going to go for the St. Louis Cardinals. I think it's going to be a separate deal.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think I'm going to believe this one too, just because of the fact that your rotation next year so far is Michaelis and Matz, correct? So you got to bring somebody in.
Matz isn't in that rotation.
I have no idea what Matt's role is next year. He'll be a water boy.
We'll see. We've got like 1.5 starters for next season right now. So.
Good, great, grand, wonderful. All right, I got one for you, fellas. Believe it or not, the Blues will have at least 10 representatives at the World Juniors this upcoming season. If you don't know, T-Bone, the World Juniors is under 20.
They
okay,
are.
I was just making sure.
Just trying to figure out who the 10
Tim
would
Taylor
be.
said this yesterday, or on his press conference that I was listening to yesterday, and I was kind of surprised. I think the most they've ever had was like 2. But you're talking about Snuggerud, you're talking about Dvorsky, Stenberg, Lindstein. You're talking about some of these other guys that the Finnish kid that you just brought up. You got 2 kids that are from the Czech Republic. You got a couple of Russians, and you've got some defensemen. I'm gonna believe this one. This might be the most well-represented World Juniors for the Blues this season that they've ever had.
Well, and you didn't even mention Dvorsky, right? He's going to be on the Slovakian team, correct? So
you got a couple of defensemen at Buchinger and Gaudette that could be a part of that also.
Yeah, and the thing that goes into that, too, is that they have a lot of players that are from a lot of other different countries. So they're not all going to be on the same roster. Yeah, so... I mean, I think I'll bet this just based off of that. If all of their prospects were, for instance, like Canadian prospects, then no,
it's tough
because
to do that.
Yeah, you're going to have players from all over the NHL, the rights of those players contributing to that team. But you have players coming from all different countries, so I'll bet that. Or I did the same thing as you did. I'll believe that.
It's a stupid game anyway.
This guy claims he created it.
That's why I said it.
I'm not going to believe it. 10's a lot.
10 is a lot.
That's why, like, I can see where they maybe get close to that, but, man, you're talking 10.
I wonder how many a team has ever had represent. Like, that would be a really interesting number. Grant, we'll figure that out. Between now and the World Juniors, we'll figure it out.
Good call.
Make a note. But, I'm not going to believe it. It just feels like too many, if I'm being honest. I got another one for you.
Okay. You're stealing the thunder, but go for it.
I am. Again, we've just mentioned it.
There are other people part of the show.
Yeah, well, I like to be a little selfish, So, believe it or not, the St. Louis Blues will have a top 10 power play this year.
I'll believe this one. I'm only believing this because I'm banking on Torrey Krug having a rebound year, especially now that you knew that a team tried to trade you and you nixed the no-trade clauses. I wonder if Torrey Krug comes out swinging. You've got some offense. Now you've got your one-timer back in Verana. Kevin Hayes is a big body that's going to be able to work on that second power play unit. The reason that number one power play unit was so good that year, or the reason the power play was so good in 21-22, was because you had two units that you could continue to cycle. Last year, you had one. The second one was just bad. Now you've got more pieces. So I'll say I'm going to believe this one.
I'll believe this one, too. And you know what? Even if Torrey Krug doesn't get back to, good health in this upcoming season and sustains that, you've got Scott Perunovich on that one-way contract now.
I'll believe that when he gets past 10 games.
I hear you, but, he's got the same issue with the health, like you said. But you've got two options there. You're hoping at least one is healthy when the other one isn't at any given time. So I'll believe this one as well. You also have Jakub Verana, who's going to be on that power play for the entirety of the season. You're going to have a whole off season to go through training camp and get that right instead of just bringing him in at the trade deadline and plugging him in and playing. So I'll believe that one.
All right, Grant, what do you got for us, believe it or not?
Okay, sticking with the Blues, Sammy Blais, when he got here last season, from when he got here to the end of the season, he had 9 goals, okay? Put that on an 82-game pace. He's at 23 goals on an 82-game pace, okay? Believe it or not, he scores 15 or more goals this upcoming season. Mind you, he had 0 goals with the Rangers last season before coming to the Blues.
I'll believe this one because I don't think he's going to be distinguished to the fourth line. I think it's going to be rotating. We always know injuries come into play, and Sammy Blais will be on your second power play unit. And Sammy Blais is going to get ice time on the penalty kill. He's going to be on the ice a lot. So I'm going to believe this one because Sammy Blais is going to be... I'll comp Sammy Blais to how they used Oscar Sundqvist when Craig Berube loved him because he put him in every situation possible. That's what Sammy Blais is going to be. So I'm believing this one.
Oh, man,
He wants to be negative so bad.
I know he does, just because I'm negative
I'm
on the
looking up
Cardinals.
because you mentioned Sundqvist, so I'm curious to know. How many times did he go over 15 goals? Never. So I'm going to say... I'm not going to believe this.
He was never viewed as a goal scorer, though. Remember that. Sundqvist was more of a...
Are we viewing Blais as one?
I thought
after last season,
scored 9
18-19
goals.
run that he had over 15 goals.
Well, it's possible.
Sundqvist got to 14 in 18-19.
See, Tanner's... he only got to 14 goals.
Well, it matters. We don't get to round up in the NHL.
Yeah, but he did get 4 in the postseason. That'd be 18 in a season.
So I'm not going to believe this. I think he could be right around that 15-goal mark. I think 10 to 15 is about where he's going to be, but... Yeah. I do think he's going to be more on the fourth line than what Alex was just saying, but I could see where he rotates up to the third as well. I just think 15's a lot. And coming from a guy that his career high was 9 this past year in the small sample size, I can't see him making that jump up to 15 and beyond.
I think the reason why I'm going to believe this one is not only because of what he did last season in his last, 30 games with the Blues, but what he was able to do in the World Tournament in the offseason, where he was one of the best players at that
with
tournament.
Jake Neighbors, too.
Yeah, and he put up, what, was it like 5 or 6 goals in that tournament? He was one of the best players.
Prediction, the start of the season, a line will be Shen, Neighbors, and Sammy Blais.
Nobody would want to play against that line.
No.
Shen, Neighbors, and Sammy Blais.
Yeah, that's a third line.
That'd be a heck of a third line.
Which means that Kapanen might be playing on a fourth line for you.
Okay, I was going to say, who'd you bump down then?
Yeah, could be Kapanen, could be somebody has an injury at the beginning of it, could be Brandon Saad, but they're gonna play Blais and Neighbors together because they had a hell of a what you said, the World Championship. Yeah.
I could see that.
We're flipping him.
Yep.
I just don't know if Kapanen will go down to the fourth line. That's where you just
he'll do whatever Craig Berube damn tells him to do.
Yeah,
Look at me. I'm the captain now.
I don't disagree with that.
Millsy, Brendan Miller, our intern, he's got a believe it or not scenario for us.
Believe it or not, Colton Parayko revamps his career and scores 12-plus goals and leads the Blues to a deep playoff run this year.
Let me answer this for Tanner.
1 to 12 goals, I don't believe in. 2 of the deep
goals.
playoff run, I don't believe. So I don't believe a lot of this. So I'm not going to believe it. Look, I think he has a bounce back year. I think that's possible. But I just don't see him ever becoming the offensive force, even though he has a slap shot, and, man, the Blues love that thing. But I don't ever see him getting to that point. And I just don't see them. I think they're a fringe playoff team at best. I'm not even convinced they're a playoff team, so I'm not going to believe it.
It is a shame that Colton Parayko just cannot find the net with his shot because it is such a hard
because
shot.
Because he winds up and he just unleashes. I don't think he knows where it's going to go.
He doesn't aim. He just fires. And if he could hit the net, that'd be dangerous. But he scored 10 goals twice in his career, so getting to 12, I think, is a little steep. So
and those 10 goals that he scored was when they had Alex Pietrangelo and Jay Bouwmeester, who played top minutes, and Parayko was the secondary minutes. I'm not believing this one. Mostly...
He'd probably miss net and hit somebody and went in.
Well, frankly, that's what he does. Teams are afraid of his shot, mostly his own team, because they're not sure where it's going to end up.
And Bishop is horrified of him.
Well, understandably so. So is Braden Shin after getting hit last year. But 10 goals is probably the sweet spot for Colton Parayko, and that's like at his best. The 12 goals things I just don't see happen. I do think he has a bounce back. I will say I can see Colton Parayko looking more like what he looked like in that 21-22 season. But those 12 goals, that might be too steep for my blood. But maybe he'll go on the number one power play. Maybe he figured out how to get that puck on net, T-Bone.
I'm going to go on a limb and say if he hasn't figured it out since the start of 15-16, he's not going to figure it out.
I'm going to go with that one, too.
He's probably listening to this, and he's going to work on it the rest of the offseason.
Hey, Colton, hey, man.
He's
Appreciate
a big fan of
the
BK and Ferrari. I know he loves Believe It or Not, so he can sing in his car. Graham Francis, Tanner Hendrickson, Brendan Miller. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, it might not be Parayko, but the Blues have 8 one-way contracts for defensemen. Can they still move on from a defenseman by having him under contract? That is confusing as all hell. I'll explain next on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the Cardinals losing 10-9 in Miami after Jordan Walker put the Cardinals up by a run in the top of the ninth with a 2-run homer. Jordan Hicks' error in the bottom of the ninth results in the Marlins walking it off. Tonight, the Cardinals will look to avoid the sweep in Game 4 of 4 in this series in Miami. It'll be the righty Yuri Perez for the Marlins, who is 5-2 this season with a 2.47 ERA. And for the Cardinals, it'll be Jack Flaherty. First pitch will be at 5:40. And we've got some roster moves to discuss as the Cardinals just made a roster move. We'll discuss that next here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. I'm Grant Francis. This SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Well, as you heard Grant Francis mention in his update, we have a roster move by the Cardinals, which shouldn't surprise anybody in terms of Matthew Liberatore being optioned down to Memphis after his struggle yesterday. But in return, the Cardinals have selected the contract of Kyle Leahy from AAA Memphis. He was a 17th round draft pick back in 2018. And Leahy, this season for Memphis, 51 innings. He's got a 4.06 ERA. He does have 51 strikeouts, so a strikeout per inning. Essentially, what we've kind of come to the conclusion, T-Bone, is this is just bringing up somebody who can add some innings to this roster between now and the All-Star break on Monday.
Yeah, this definitely feels like a move in which they are just trying to find some innings from their bullpen, and they needed a fresh arm. And look, Leahy kind of impressed the Cardinals in spring training. I thought he had a good spring, and I just looked this up to confirm it. He had 6 games in spring training, allowed 3 hits, 1 run. It wasn't earned. He did walk 2, but he struck out 9 and held opponents to a 143 batting average again. So he had an impressive spring training. The Cardinals sent him down to Memphis, and now he's going to get an opportunity, so good for him. But, yeah, he's mostly here to just kind of eat innings out of the bullpen. And with the Cardinals moving Matthew Liberatore to the to AAA Memphis, it signals that they're going to turn things over back to Steven Matz, at least in that spot. What they're going to do with Waino's spot, unknown still, but they only needed one more starting pitcher in terms of you got Montgomery, Jack, who goes tonight, and Michaelis. You needed one more start for the 4 games remaining. It seems like it's probably going to be Steven Matz. They haven't made that official, but that would be my assumption with this move with Liberatore going down to the minors.
Yeah, unless it is going to be Thompson, but Steven Matz pitched yesterday, gave him, 2 innings of work through like 40, 50 pitches, so that's most likely with this. This just seems like a James Nail move. Just bring somebody up who can give you some innings, eat some games, or eat some innings when the game gets out of hand one way or the other. So Kyle Leahy is recalled or brought up by the Cardinals. His contract is purchased, and he now will be with the team in the bullpen. We'll hit more on the Cardinals once we hit the rewind, but I want to play a cut from Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic, who was on the opening drive earlier today talking about the Blues defense and what Doug Armstrong could do if there is anything still.
I would not think that Doug is done trying. Whether he can execute something or not, I don't know. We saw it with the no-trade clause with Torrey Krug. He invoked it, and Doug didn't get to make the trade that he wanted to make. But I think it's a situation where there is stuff on the burners. There's probably other options. It's just all going to come down to, will a player with a no-trade clause approve something? So I think at some point we'll see something with the defenseman.
So that's where it's at right now. And I think we all can come to the conclusion, doesn't seem likely any of the 4 defensemen are going to waive their no-trade clause, and unless you're moving Bortuzzo, which I don't expect, or Marco Scandella, who's got the modified no-trade, you're going to have the same defenseman. But I do still think there is a way for this Blues team to reshuffle their defense, even if you can't trade away a defenseman. And what I mean by that is, it would not surprise me at any point, any stretch this upcoming season, that the 3 left-handed defensemen for the Blues is any combination of Scott Perunovich, Nick Leddy, Marco Scandella, and Tyler Tucker. And I didn't have Torrey Krug's name in this for a reason. If Scott Perunovich performs well, I can absolutely see the Blues healthy scratch Torrey Krug. I can absolutely see them healthy scratch Nick Leddy. Now, Nick Leddy and Torrey Krug have had injury issues over the last couple of years. Marco Scandella, of course, the same, so that plays into this. But you've got 8 defensemen. You've got Calle Rosen also, who's on a 2-way contract. there's a way to reshuffle the deck with your defenseman by not trading away. And it's sitting a couple of guys in the press box, which would not surprise me because they are super high on Tyler Tucker. Marco Scandella is big and strong like they like on their defense. And then you've got Scott Perunovich if he stays healthy.
See, I don't see the Blues doing that because I don't think they want to put a $6.5 million defenseman just up there in the press box. And same with Nick Leddy, a $4 million defenseman, because if the Blues aren't comfortable buying a player out, I don't think they're going to go sit a player up in the press box because you're essentially paying a guy not to play.
But
That's
you know how you get a guy
doing.
to waive his no-trade clause? By getting him frustrated and he's not playing.
I think that is more talk of the town than it is an actual reality that the Blues are going to do. I can't see them. Look, they tried to move Krug, and it's not going to happen. So I think what's going to happen is they're going to keep Krug and Leddy there. I think what we see is they're going to kind of do, I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I can't remember. I think what they're going to do is they're going to be rotating that third pairing defensive pair a lot. You may see guys in and out of the lineup kind of doing what the Cardinals did with their outfield, where it was one guy starts one day, next day it's maybe somebody else, depending on the matchup and how the Blues like it. Do they want more of a physical presence? Maybe they go to Tucker. Do they want more puck movement in that game? Maybe it's a high-flying team like the Edmonton Oilers. Maybe then you start Scott Perunovich. I think that's what they're going to do. I have a tough time seeing the Blues saying, let's set a $6.5 million defenseman, Torrey Krug, in the press box, or $4 million defenseman, Nick Leddy.
Where I sit on this is you're always going to have injuries. It just happens. We saw it last season, especially with the defensemen and how things have gone for Torrey Krug and Scott Perunovich. It's going to happen. It's not if, it's when. So I think to start the season, if there is no trade that is able to be pulled off this offseason, you're going to see Torrey Krug start the season. That's just how it's probably going to go. But when there is an injury and you have a chance to bring someone in, like a Scott Perunovich or a Tyler Tucker, or however it shapes out, if they play to the level that Torrey Krug is or better, then I don't think Torrey Krug comes back into the lineup until someone doesn't play as well as what he was playing when he went down.
Yeah.
That's how I view it. I think this will work itself out to the point where you don't have to necessarily scratch one of these players initially, but then someone comes behind them, plays better than them, and you're saying, well, look at the on-ice production. So you're going to be scratched until this player is not playing as well as he is now.
When Doug Armstrong held his press conference before the draft, somebody asked if you have to move a defenseman because you've got so many of them and you want playing time. And Doug said, I don't have to do anything. Play will dictate time on ice. And to me, that's holding everybody accountable. If you play poorly, somebody's taking your spot. I don't even think it has to do with injury. I think if Scott Perunovich is playing well, they're going to give him an opportunity. And I think if Tyler Tucker is providing physicality, he's going to play. And I think if Marco Scandella is providing physicality and that size and strength, he's going to play. Here's what I don't see happening. A trio of Leddy, Krug, and Perunovich on the ice. Because one thing that Doug talked about in the offseason was size on the blue line. And you are not going to have three guys under 6 foot playing on the left side with your right side. That didn't work, and it's not going to work. They've got speed. They can move the puck, but you need some size, especially on the penalty kill. Out of the names that I just told you, if your starting 6 was Krug, Perunovich, Leddy, Parayko, Falk, Bortuzzo, who are your penalty killers?
Bortuzzo's definitely one.
Bortuzzo's one of them.
Parayko would be one.
Yeah. That's two guys.
Leddy would be one.
And they run 3 penalty kill lines.
You have a problem.
You've got a problem. And guess what you said needed to improve? Your special teams. So the way that you shape this defense is the talent plays, not the contract. It's what we talk all the time about Cardinals. It's what we talk about Blues. You don't play the contract. You play the best players available. And for better or worse, I believe the Blues are in that spot on their defense. If they can't ship somebody out, then somebody who's making significant money might be sitting in the press box if they've got issues. Now, they don't really have a spot for this guy, but I've fallen in love with another player.
Can I guess?
Yeah, please.
Callie Rosen?
No, not Callie Rosen.
I've fallen in love with Callie Rosen.
Don't tell Carrie Davis that I said that. I like Callie Rosen. Don't love Callie Rosen. No, I love a guy named Philip Zadina.
Oh.
Now, people might be listening and be like, who the bleep is that, Ferrario?
That's what I was just thinking.
It's a former 6th overall draft pick by the Detroit Red Wings. He was placed on waivers. Nobody claimed him. Kind of expected that because he's making like $2 million for the next 2 years. He's being bought out because nobody claimed him and the Detroit Red Wings want to be done with it. 23 years old. He's been okay. He was expected to be a really good player, just never panned out in Detroit. There's one thing I know about Doug. Right now, they're in the phase of giving guys opportunities. You're overloaded on offense. I don't know how the hell this works because you've already got a ton of dudes that play forward and not enough spots. But I'd like to see the Blues sign this individual and give him a shot, because what it does is it adds depth to your team. When you traded for Jakub Vrana, you basically said, we're going to add him, and if we plays well and we can't keep him, then we flip him and we get some capital for him. You've got all of these guys in the minors that aren't contributing to the NHL. You'd bring in a Zadina and say you're playing at the NHL, but you'd also bring him in and hope that he plays better and he becomes an asset. Either you keep him or you find a way to flip him. It'd be somebody I'd keep in mind in terms of a player who's not going to be expensive, wants an NHL opportunity, and you've got a place that you can provide that to him.
I just don't know how he really fits in terms of.
I'll find a place for him.
I think they've got enough forwards on the roster right now to where I think they're set. Because you're also hoping for, you talk about, and I know he's a centerman and Zadina's a winger, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But, you've got guys like Bolduc, Dean, you're hoping that could potentially steal a job in camp. You just brought in McEachran. You've got Toropchenko. You've got, who am I forgetting? Oh, Neighbors potentially, or Blay, who's I was thinking of, that could be on the fourth line. I think they're set on their forward group. If you said, Zadina was a defenseman, maybe you could go out there and make a move. I don't know how you even make that work because he had 8 defensemen on contract. I think the roster's just filled out now. Had this happened before they signed McEachran, sure, maybe I could have heard the argument and been all aboard this. I just think the roster's filled out now to where I just don't know if they're going to be able to make this happen, or B, want to make it happen.
Send somebody down to the minors. I'd give an opportunity for somebody like this. I'm not worried about McEachran or worried about Alexandrov or worried about any of these guys. I want the best team available. And if I'm leaning into my offense, I'll go get somebody who provides offense.
I don't know. I just feel like...
Come on, guys. Trying to win here.
I don't mind the idea of Philip Zadina. I think he's a fine player. But you have so many third-line guys right now. That's not who you need.
Yeah, Blues are full of third-liners like the Cardinals are full of outfielders.
Look how it's working for the Cardinals. No, the Blues are full of third-liners like the Cardinals are full of number 4 starters in their rotation.
There you go. That's a better count.
Speaking of the Cardinals, we'll rewind it with them next here on 101 ESPN. Been a fun day here on BK and Ferrario. If you missed our conversation with John Denton or anything from the show, you can check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. That'll be a little bit after the show, and appreciate everybody on our new live YouTube channel at 101ESPN STL. And make sure you stick there because the Fast Lane coming up in just a bit from 2 to 6 o'clock. But we'll rewind it with the Cardinals pitching and a topic that we got into with John Denton and a really good discussion that we had earlier in the program. And now we're seeing once again the Cardinals' lack of options with their pitchers. Because if you just missed it, a transaction took place. Matthew Liberatore has been optioned to Memphis, and the Cardinals have purchased the contract of Kyle Leahy, minor league pitcher, who essentially is being brought up to provide innings. But this is where the Cardinals are at. It's just a revolving door of guys that you're purchasing contracts to come up and provide innings. And I understand the Cardinals' mindset here if not rushing Graceffo and McGreevy and Tinkens because you're not going to put them in a bad situation. Let them thrive in the minors and come up. It's what the Blues have done. But you also are at the point now where you are going back and cycling through all of these pieces that you know aren't going to be a part of this ball club moving forward. You just got to get through to August 1st to see what's out there on the trade market. But now we are realizing what we talked about, T-Bone. You just don't really have many options that improve this team in terms of pitching.
Yeah, they don't have any internal answers right now for their rotation, and honestly, even in the bullpen right now. So right now it is more of just kind of, I don't even know if it's get to August 1st. It's just get to the end of the year right now. If you're the St. Louis Cardinals, try and capitalize on some of your best trade assets, and we'll talk about this tomorrow. But there's an article from MLB Trade Rumors. There's a great follow on Twitter, and they have Jordan Montgomery, Jack Flaherty is listed as 4 and 5 in their top 50 of trade deadline candidates. So
damn, who was 1 through 3?
1 through 3, Scott Barlow, who's a great reliever for the Royals. Yeah. Jameer Candelario, third baseman for the Nationals, who's been incredible. And then number 1, Lucas Giolito, my guy. Man, he'll be the top commodity, I believe. But
I wonder if Jordan Montgomery overtakes him before the end of the season or before the trade deadline.
It's possible. I mean, he's definitely been better than him so far this year.
Starts from Montgomery.
I think Giolito is more of a upside in terms of he's got more swing and miss, but either way, like I think right now when you look at the Cardinals, it's clear they don't have answers. They are unbelievably thin when it comes to pitching as an organization, and that's where the major changes come in, where if they move Montgomery and Jack Flaherty, some bullpen pieces like Hicks, they're going to be looking to regain some assets and probably add into their pitching. You heard John Denton tell us like he wouldn't be shocked if they draft a bunch of pitchers in the first couple of rounds of the MLB draft, which is this weekend. And then also they're going to be making adjustments, whether it be at the deadline or in the offseason, to try and improve the rotation for next season at the major league level. So they have to do all kinds of supplementing to the staff, supplementing it in the minors and supplementing it here at the big league level.
We'll talk about this more tomorrow, but the way you got it set up for these final 4 games, you've got Flaherty, you've got Mike Montgomery, you've got Michaelis, and then that last start against the Chicago White Sox, that is supposed to be Waino's spot. Obviously, he won't be pitching. Is that Steven Matz? Do you think that's going to be a Steven Matz start?
That would be my guess, is that they will turn to Steven Matz. The fact that they didn't use him right away yesterday, and I know they did pitch him, but I think he threw like 34 pitches. I think they were forced
to use him because Dakota Hudson and Liberatore.
I don't think they wanted to use him, so I think it's either gonna be Matz or Thompson would be my guess. Maybe it's a piggyback. Maybe they go Thompson and Matz or Matz and Thompson, but I think it's probably Steven Matz. I think they got to figure out if he's been effective in the bullpen. He's been really good. He's got I think it's a sub-2 ERA. I don't know how his numbers got inflated from last night's start, but he's been really good out of the pen. They need to figure out if he's a starter for next season, because you want to talk about picking a path. Matz is either in the bullpen and you got 4 spots to fill with the rotation, or you put him in the rotation and then you've only got 3.
And I think it's an important start if Matz gets it, but I also think it's important if Thompson gets it, because Thompson is going to be another one of those guys that they took him out of the bullpen where he was performing well, and they sent him to the minors and said stretch out as a starter, which basically tells you that the Cardinals realize they're thin in the starters market. If Zach Thompson gets it, or even if it's a piggyback, it's going to be a massive outing for both of those guys on Monday, it would be, or Sunday, it would be against the White Sox, because both are going to be competing for one of those rotation spots. But again, we'll get more into that tomorrow on BK and Ferrario. Again, tonight you got Flaherty versus Perez, Cardinals and Marlins as they avoid the sweep, or try to avoid the sweep. It'll be a 5:40 first pitch. Leading you up to that, it's the Fast Lane coming up next with Anthony Stalter, Jamie Rivers, and Andrew Marsh. Stick around on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL, and of course here on 101 ESPN. We'll be back with you tomorrow from 11 to 2 right here on BK and Ferrario.